Those are new.
I guess. Tom's birthday.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Durham Planning Commission. The members of the Durham Planning Commission have been appointed by the City Council and the County Board of Commissioners as an advisory board to the elected officials. You should know that the elected officials have the final say on any issue before us tonight. If you wish to speak on an agenda item tonight, please go to the table to my left and sign up to speak. For those of you who wish to speak, please state your name and your address clearly when you come to the podium. Please speak clearly and into the microphone. Each side, those speaking in favor of an item and those speaking in opposition to an item, will have 10 minutes to present for each side. The time will be divided among all persons wishing to speak. Finally, all motions are stated in the affirmative, so if a motion fails or ties, the recommendation is for denial. Thank you. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Present.
Commissioner Brine?
Present.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Alturk?
Here.
Vice Chair Busby?
Here.
Chair Hyman?
Present?
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Ketchen is absent and excused. Commissioner requested excuse. Commissioner Santiago?
Here.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner Lowe?
Present.
And Commissioner McIver?
Here.
Thank you. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Grace Smith with the Planning Department. Staff is not aware of any adjustments that need to be made tonight, and we would like to state for the record that all notice and publishment requirements have been met in accordance with state and local law, and those affidavits are on file in the Planning Department.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Well, question. Commissioner Brine?
Under new business, I would like to add one new item, and that is a quick question to staff on EHC.
Thank you. Motion to approve the agenda with adjustments.
So moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Brine and second by Commissioner Alturk that the agenda be approved with adjustments. All in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are ready for our first public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, missed the minutes. I need a motion to approve the minutes and consistency statement from the September 10, 2019 meeting. Question, Commissioner Brine.
I do have a question. I know that I was excused from that meeting, but I do not see a motion to excuse me.
And so you're looking for it now?
Well, I thought maybe it just got left
I
out.
think we made it. It might just be omitted by accident, so we'll take a look at that. We can
Thank
fix
you.
that. Sorry about that, Mr. Bryan.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes and consistency statement as presented with the change, with the inclusion?
So moved. Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Alturk, second by Commissioner Morgan, that we approve the minutes as and consistency statement from September 10. All in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Now we're ready for the first public hearing. Okay, let her get there.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Yes, the chair recognizes Vice Chair Busby.
Thank you. Before we begin this case, in accordance with our rules of procedure, I am in the mail zone for this particular item. So as I did when this first came to the Planning Commission, probably about a year ago at this point, I will need a motion to recuse myself.
Move that we recuse Commissioner Busby.
Second. Motion by Commissioner Brine, second by Commissioner Wilson to recuse Vice Chair Busby. All in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand. All opposed? Thank you. Out you go. Now we're ready for the staff report.
All right, good evening. I'm Carla Rosenberg with the Planning Department, and I'm here to present Plan Amendment Case A18-00004, Forest Hills. As you may recall, this proposal, which seeks to reduce the density of future development in the area, was initially brought before you in August of last year, and it was subsequently placed on an administrative hold. It has been revised since that date so that it no longer includes the 20 parcels pertaining to the Pinecrest development. And in addition, the applicant is requesting slightly more density for certain parcels than previously proposed. Staff did not find these revisions to affect staff's evaluation of the proposal, and so tonight's presentation is similar to what you heard last year. You also have a more thorough summary of staff's position in your staff report. So for this request, the applicant, Mr. Timothy Profeta, is proposing to amend approximately 200 acres of the future land use map from medium-density residential to various less intensive residential uses based on current zoning designations. In addition, he's proposing to move approximately 300 acres of land from the urban tier into the suburban tier. These changes are intended to preserve past development patterns and existing neighborhood character. So this is an aerial map that shows the position of the subject area with respect to current and future transportation corridors. You see the Durham Freeway is outlined in yellow. It's located about 1/2 mile to the northeast, and the proposed Dillard Street stop of a future transit system, outlined in green, is at 0.8 miles distance. So the current future land use map shows that the downtown development tier, shown in white, is located 1/4 mile away. The subject area, shown with red and white hashes, measures approximately 1 mile from north to south and over 1/2 mile from east to west. The area is bisected by the Forest Hills Park, designated as recreation and open space, the second largest municipal park in the county. Land to the north, west, and south of the subject area is designated medium-density residential, and land to the east is medium-high-density residential. A small commercial area is located to the northeast, transitioning to the downtown design district. When the 2005 comprehensive plan established the current development tier system, it incorporated Forest Hills into the urban tier and increased the future land use density of the area, less the recreation and open space, to medium-density residential, which is the lowest density designation assigned in the urban tier. Here are some images showing single-family homes located at the interior of the subject area. In his justification statement, the applicant suggests that the current land use designation of medium-density residential and the current urban tier designation ought to be amended because they allow for denser development than was originally designed in the neighborhood and what is currently on the ground. The applicant also cites the importance of preserving the neighborhood's sense of place, derived from its current low density, its circular roadway layout, and its allowance for economic diversity and abundant open space. So here are some additional photos of the area depicting current open space in the Forest Hills Park. And then the peripheries of the subject area, including Kent Street, which makes up the western border of the subject area with large backyards fronting the roadway and some multifamily development in the southern portion of the site. So staff has reviewed the request against 4 criteria for plan amendments found in the Unified Development Ordinance: consistency with adopted plans and policies, compatibility with existing or future land use patterns, that there be no substantial adverse impact, and that the subject area be of adequate shape and size for the proposed use. So starting with consistency with adopted plans and policies, we found that the proposed amendment is not consistent with land use policies in the comprehensive plan, specifically those regarding the urban tier definition, urban tier development, contiguous development, and demand for land uses. This first policy supports access to urban services and provides opportunities for infill and redevelopment. Staff finds that the proposal reduces access to services by reducing density where services and infrastructure are most accessible, and that the request reduces opportunities for infill by placing additional regulatory constraints on new development. For urban tier development, then this next policy states that the land surrounding the downtown and compact neighborhood tiers should be designated as urban tier. The subject area is located within 1/4 mile of the downtown tier, and thus appears appropriately designated as urban tier. The third policy supports orderly development patterns that take advantage of existing urban services and avoids non-contiguous scattered development. Under the present proposal, the subject area becomes an isolated area or island of suburban tier within the urban tier. The proposal furthermore reduces overall access to urban services and infrastructure and increases pressures on development growing outward rather than inward. Finally, the fourth policy evaluates the projected need for the requested land use in the future. As Durham's population expands, the demand for housing is increasing, leading to a rising cost. The costs are highest closest to the city center, where land is less available. As you know, City Council recently passed the UDO text amendment expanding housing choices to help increase the variety and supply of housing types closest to the city center. The present proposal would limit or exempt Forest Hills from many of the housing allowances adopted because of its limited applicability in the suburban tier. So returning to the 4 criteria for plan amendments, although the proposal may match existing development patterns, we found that it does not match future land use patterns, which show rapid growth, particularly toward the city center. We did determine there to be substantial adverse impact with regard to infrastructure, environmental protection, and future demand for land uses, all of which are detailed in the staff report. And finally, staff determined that the site is of adequate shape and size to accommodate the proposed residential land uses. So the applicant's request additionally includes a tier boundary change, moving 300 acres of the current urban tier into the suburban tier. There's an additional set of criteria set forth within the UDO to address tier boundary changes. We found that the proposal did not meet the first criterion for a tier boundary change, which is that the site be contiguous to the proposed tier. And so, the requests do not meet all of the necessary criteria for a plan amendment or tier boundary change, and staff is not recommending approval of any portion of this request. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to open the public hearing, and I would like to have the list of individuals who have signed up to speak, please. Thank you. I'm going to call the first 3 individuals who have signed up, Neil Ghosh, George Vaughn, and Christy Ferguson.
Do we have a time limit? Just want to be aware of that.
Beg pardon?
Do we have a time limit?
2 minutes.
2 minutes per person?
Yes. 'Cause
Okay,
it's an even
thank you.
number.
Chair Hyman. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm an attorney at the Morningstar Law Group. First of all, happy birthday, Commissioner Miller. I hope there's no cupcake on my face. But if there is, it's too late. I also want to thank staff for their work on this project despite the recommendation for denial. And I also want to take a moment to applaud the neighbors who filed this application. It's not often that you see a lot of neighbors come together and take advantage of the tools in the UDO, but this is one of the cases where that's exactly what happened. So I think they deserve at least a little bit of credit for trying to enter into an arena that generally is dominated by private, or by developers. I guess we only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to be brief and touch on 3 things. First, I think it's important, I know some of you were here when this originally came in front of the Planning Commission, but it's important to understand why and when this originally was filed. The Pinecrest development informed the neighbors about the current status of the long-range plan in Forest Hills, and that kind of awoken the neighbors to what was going on. that's when they decided to take advantage of the tools provided in the UDO in order to become an active member of the planning process rather than a reactive member, which happens all too often. Ultimately, the neighbors, through a lot of negotiations with the Pinecrest developers, agreed to and came to an understanding and supported the Pinecrest development. So it's not the case that these neighbors simply don't want development. They simply want that development to make sense and to be wise, and they want to be included as part of those negotiations rather than to have a overarching long-range planning document which tells them what ought to be developed in their neighborhood. Second, and I see I'm going to run out of time here, but I do think it's important to say this was not this neighborhood's first attempt. They did, in fact, file an MPO, and I want to take issue with the section of the staff report which suggests that the neighbors could address their concerns through a local historic district. I don't necessarily disagree with that statement, but it does kind of gloss over the fact that they did file for an MPO, which is another tool which could have addressed their concerns. And basically the message they're getting is to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George Vaughn.
My name is George Vaughn. I live at 1022 Westwood Drive in Forest Hills, and I support this FLUM, their FLUM amendment, I should say. The staff report talks about not complying with the 2005 future land use map, but didn't mention what some of the problems were in that, and that's what we're trying to deal with. Our application for the NPO and our application for this amendment to the FLUM are our ways of attempting to deal with some of the problems that came from that original land use plan and what's been added since EHC was approved. The Planning Commission and its special committees report to council, which outlined what was wrong with EHC and the changes needed. I thought that was a really insightful and very well done report that committee produced. But council did not make those changes, and now we have to wait for the use plan, the new comprehensive use plan, which is, we don't know how long that's going to be, 2 years, 3 years, during which time we are at risk for losing the character of Forest Hills. So that's why we've taken these steps, these applications. And as Neil pointed out, these are what we are allowed to do by the rules that are in place in Durham. So that's basically what I had to say. We just want our neighborhood preserved, and we want to be safe from any real changes until the new comprehensive land use map is done. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Ferguson.
Hi, I'm Christy Ferguson. I live at 1011 Homer Street, and I am here to ask you to vote in favor of the future land use map amendment. Last month, City Council passed expanding housing choices, and as many people see it, one of the primary problems with EHC is that it incentivizes builders to knock down affordable, historic, or both kinds of houses and replace them with large, expensive units to the benefit of developers and at the expense of everyone else. None of the changes will address the challenges that Durham is facing with regard to gentrification and displacement, and may in fact do the opposite. Contrary to our image, Forest Hills is an economically diverse neighborhood. We all picture the grand homes on Hermitage Court and Oak Drive, the ones in the picture on the report, but there are also streets with small homes under 1,000 square feet, for example, on Carolina Circle and Starlight Drive. Forest Hills also has undeveloped tracts of land, including a large tract along Kent Street, in addition to smaller parcels that are scattered throughout the neighborhood. As part of the upcoming development of the new comp plan, Forest Hills could be designed to absorb more households and increase density without doing harm to the neighborhood. Those plans need not be limited to duplexes or to subdividing lots. Maybe an apartment building or quadruplexes would make sense in some parts of Forest Hills. But we lose the opportunity to be intentional about our development by waiting. The new comp plan process, which is just around the corner, will give all of the urban tier neighborhoods a chance to plan their growth in a manner that's tailored to each community. In the meantime, to avoid losing that opportunity, I would ask that you please approve our request.
Thank you. Tom Metzloff.
Thank you very much. I'm Tom Metzloff. I live at 1026 Westwood Drive. I think all of you, or at least most of you, were on the Planning Commission back August a year ago when we had our first hearing about this situation. And I think what we've heard is very much true now. The slum was something we didn't know about. And when this Pinecrest development came in, originally with 72 or 80 houses on a 12-acre site, and I live on the same block as that, it was a surprise to us to learn how this was planned. And at the suggestion of, I think having learned that, we came back to think about the Flum Amendment. Why can't we change that? We really aren't the urban tier. Some of you called us an island. I don't know if we all like that term or not, but we think of ourselves as very much part of Durham and connected. But we are actually a lot longer away from downtown than 0.5 miles. I don't know anybody who can walk, maybe from the one edge, but from the middle of Forest Hills, it's not an easy walk through and over the Durham Freeway. What we proposed in our Flum agreement was to basically keep the zoning that we had, what was before that. And it is consistent with the way this neighborhood was developed. We are a neighborhood that is mostly developed, 90%, all single-family homes. And within the area of Pinecrest, the smallest lot is about 0.3 acres. The average lot is 0.75. What we heard from all of you, and we heard it very clearly, I'll never forget it, was maybe that some of that zoning is anachronistic, maybe that doesn't fit. We hear you that the Flum isn't right for Forest Hills, but what you have isn't right either. And what this amendment is, as I understand it, is more technical, is that we are taking that part of Forest Hills that was zoned for 2 houses per acre and doubling it to the consistent zoning that is in most of Forest Hills. So this is a very significant upzoning with this Flum amendment to what's there. It would permit the Pinecrest development that we ended up getting, and we could have avoided what was a very, very difficult fight. So thank you very much. I think we listened to you and we heard what you wanted us to do. And I think as a result, I certainly hope that you will support the Flum amendment.
Thank you. Rhonda Cohen and Tom Clayton.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Cohen of 1211 Bivens Street. I've lived in Forest Hills for 25 years. 5 years ago, my husband and I built a new house in Forest Hills on an undeveloped parcel behind our original house. Yes, there are undeveloped parcels in Forest Hills. There's another undeveloped parcel next to our smaller house. Will that parcel be developed in a manner consistent with the neighborhood, or will expanding housing choices create the chaotic addition of multi-unit dwellings that our infrastructure cannot maintain? Please vote in favor of the Forest Hills Future Land Use Map Amendment. Thank you.
And then Tom Clayton.
My name is Tom Clayton. I live at 1016 Forest Hills, or 1016 Homer Street in Forest Hills. I've been there for 33 years. I'm in favor of the proposed Forest Hills amendment to the future land use map. But as you and the planning department are rethinking Durham's entire comprehensive development plan, I would like to make a broader point about the actual concept on which the current Flum is based. While homogenized concentric circles of development density might be an elegant theoretical concept, in a dynamically diverse city like Durham, it bears little resemblance to what actually is in place. And because the Flum fails to account for multiple factors that currently significantly impact housing decisions, like varied topography, prior development, location of transportation arteries, and commercial enclaves, it simply never will. Far from conforming to concentric tiers, Durham's multi-talented, innovative, and independent citizens have created a rich patchwork of neighborhoods and housing options throughout the city, which for the most part are quite viable. and with the support contemplated in the affordable housing bond, can become an even more beautiful, thoroughly realized quilt. So I urge you to support the proposed Forest Hills amendment to the FLUM as a step away from the hopelessly flawed donut concept and a step toward a comprehensive plan that more appropriately reflects the multi-hued city we all have built, and which provides an effective way forward that avoids the imposition of such an ill-fitted, entirely artificial concept. Thanks so much for your consideration.
Thank you. Those are all of the individuals that I have who've signed up for. I do have one individual who has signed up against, Aaron Kane.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Kane. I live at 425 Carolina Circle, which is in Forest Hills. I've been there about 18 years now, and I just like to respectfully disagree with some of my neighbors who live on the other side of the neighborhood. And I realize and understand that they went through some things with the Pinecrest development, but my concern is that not all of Forest Hills is necessarily built to the larger lots that are on the west side of Forest Hills. Over where I live on Carolina Circle, we have a wide variety of housing types. We have large lots. We have small houses on small lots. And one of the things that's been able to do for us is provide a lot of diversity in terms of the type of folks that live there. Like I said, I've been there almost a generation now. When I first moved in 2001, we had mostly empty nesters, a lot of elderly folks, and I've watched the neighborhood turn over. It's been able to turn over because we've had some smaller houses, some more affordable houses in the neighborhood. And my concern is that this proposed amendment would basically try to freeze the development in place and not allow for some infill and some changes that allow for things like my street to take place. So I respectfully disagree. I would like to be able to see more infill and for us in Forest Hills to be a part of the changing landscape of Durham and be a part of the affordability solution that we hopefully we will all have. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not have any other individuals who have signed up to speak, so I am going to close the public hearing.
You've got a hand.
Oh, I see a hand. Someone who would like to speak for or?
He's for.
You need to come forward to the mic. Our listening audience will not be able to hear you until you get to the mic. And then afterwards, I'm going to have to ask you to sign the sign-in sheet. Thank you.
My name is Larry Pollard. I have lived on Cedar Street for 71 and a half years. I have seen my house go from being a very large house with a lot of other large houses around it, and has changed considerably in the neighborhood to having more reasonable houses around it. The neighborhood has grown not necessarily by the housing, but it has grown by the people that are in the houses. Now, one thing that I think that the board should consider is the age of the houses and the fact that trying to maintain a very large house that has considerable amount of age to it and needed repairs to it, needing to be done to it, that it's going to be unreasonable to think that we could sell one large house and get the value for it when you could have smaller houses on the density of the lot. The lot is almost 2 acres in size. I don't know exactly the number of units that I would be able to get on that, but I do know that if it was developed properly, it would provide for sufficient infill and sufficient land around the infill that would make it more reasonable and certainly more profitable than than developing or redoing this older home of 70-some years. And I think that the council should keep this in mind because it's putting a burden on people who have lived in the homes, and they are large, and a lot of them are old, And if they can't be replaced and get the similar zoning that Pinecrest or some of the other areas would get, is almost unfair. So I would ask you to consider making a flexibility in your zoning that would account for the age of the structure that's on the property now.
Thank you. I do not have any other individuals who have signed up to speak, so I am going to close the public hearing and give our commissioners an opportunity to ask questions. I'll start to my right. Commissioners, do you have questions? Commissioner Bryan, are there other commissioners who would like to speak? Okay. Commissioner Bryan.
I just want to start with 2 questions for staff. On page 2 of the staff report, the last sentence in section B states the planning department recently received a separate rezoning request from an applicant, et cetera, et cetera. That was true when this first came before us, but I don't think it's true anymore.
That's correct. That was, that should have been eliminated from this revised version.
And also in the staff report that was before us once before, among other options that were mentioned was MPOs, neighborhood protection overlays. That's not mentioned in this staff report, and I was curious as to why.
Good evening, I'm Scott Whiteman with the Planning Department. We do have an active NPO application from Forest Hills. We informed the neighborhood and the JCCPC that with all our staff deployed on the comprehensive plan, we wouldn't have enough internal capacity to do that, and we did submit a budget request to hire a consultant to do that, but that was not included in the adopted city budget.
Well, that's fine. I'm just, MPO is an option, but you didn't mention it in the report.
There is an active application.
Okay. Which I think should really be high priority, in my humble opinion. If you prove something that neighbors have submitted, I think JCCPC needs to give it high priority. That's all I have for the moment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Santiago.
So I have a few comments, but first of all, I would like to ask a clarifying question. A couple residents spoke about multifamily development. One in particular said that she was unsure about whether or not her adjacent property would be redeveloped into multifamily, whereas a different resident said that we can develop apartment buildings and different units. So I just want to clarify, and I don't know if the department wants to answer this or residents, but clarify what exactly are we looking for in terms of development here? Is it single family? Like what developments are we trying to?
So, I don't know if I can go back on the slides, but the area covered by this application is quite large, as you can see here. So there are several different zoning districts within this area. So in some areas of Forest Hills, it is possible under the current zoning to develop multifamily homes. In most of Forest Hills, I believe about 90%, the current zoning would allow only for single-family homes. Now, the Flum Amendment, of course, does not affect the current zoning. It just is a policy document that's forward-looking. And as I explained, one of the reasons that the neighbors joined together to file this was when they learned about the Pinecrest development, which was originally proposed as a rather high-density option in Forest Hills neighborhood, and it was consistent with the future land use map, which is one reason the neighbors felt that the future land use map ought to be changed. So the current application, the current request, allows for multifamily development in certain parts of Forest Hills as it already is allowed in those portions. It also allows for, in the planning document on the future land use map, it would allow for more density in Forest Hill than currently is allowed under the current zoning. However, the future land use map would support zoning districts which would ultimately allow less density than what the current future land use map allows for today. That's why we're applying to amend the future land use map. So it does depend on which portion of Forest Hills you are talking about, but yeah, in general, multifamily development is appropriate in Forest Hills in sections. Single-family development in Forest Hills is appropriate in certain sections. That's.
So going off of that, it really highlights, for me, my concern about how EHC for this commission and the city was forward-thinking. And a lot of the residents came out speaking for EHC, talking about socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, diversity in houses and housing supply. Now, looking at the list that we have here of the residents, I only took the time to go through the first 141 parcels. Out of those 141, 125 of them are white-owned parcels. So you're talking about a neighborhood that wants to limit supply over time, over the next number of years, and that is not going to parlay our goals as a city to increase the supply, to address racial equity, and that is what I'm concerned about with this future land use map amendment.
I didn't hear a question, so I'm not going to respond.
Thank you. Commissioner Baker?
I didn't request that.
Okay,
But I'll
sorry.
speak, but I'll say something.
Well, no.
I appreciate the sort of the work that was put into this, both on the part of staff and also on the part of residents. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, but there's good tact. I think you came to us at the right time, right after the EHC. One thing that I think is very consistent with all the different applications that we get before us is that we're oftentimes reacting. That's kind of what we do. We react, and oftentimes it's to two different options that are suboptimal options. And so that is not the way that we want to move forward. I hope that coming out of the comprehensive plan, we will be able to be more proactive in our planning and create better systems and staff our planning department appropriately to be able to do more area planning and be more intentional about the way that we grow. So again, I really appreciate the work that has gone into this, the thoughts behind it, the people that came up and spoke, the residents that came up and spoke. And I hope that when we move forward from this, that we can be more proactive about the kind of planning that we're doing and be more intentional and thoughtful about what we're doing. So just be aware that we will submit comments after we take our vote. And so we will send forward to City Council, assuming you move forward to City Council, any caveats or any other thoughts that we have, regardless of what our votes end up being up here.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a question to staff to begin with. So when we saw the staff report before, and now again, you suggest as an alternative local historic district. Is it the city planning department's policy with regard to Forest Hills that there should be a local historic district? You're the historic preservation planner. The comprehensive plan is full of policies that direct the city to look for opportunities to create, identify historic assets and to protect them. Is this one of those instances where the city thinks that Forest Hills should be a local historic district?
Normally, historic districts are sort of initiated by the citizens, so we would require 50% of the residents in the area to sign a petition, but the city.
So I've got Mr. Whiteman here because actually, any applications for it to create a new district would go through the policy group versus the land use group. So he can correct me if I'm
My
wrong.
question isn't about
Right.
procedure.
I
What is the
understand.
staff's position about whether or not Forest Hills should be a local historic district?
Yeah, the staff does not have a position on whether any neighborhood should or should not be historic district.
So what does the comprehensive plan mean when it directs our planning apparatus to identify historic assets and seek to protect them with the local historic district application? I mean, it seems to me that we are picking and choosing under our current comprehensive plan the policies we like and the ones we don't like. And I just want to know, in this case, which ones are we choosing and which ones are we choosing to not follow?
Certainly, if it was a city or county priority to proactively establish local historic districts, we could do that, but it's just, there's conflicting priorities and limited resources.
Thank you. So the real issue here, to me, is what is the city's policy with regard to Forest Hills? And I said this before, and I'll say it again. And the problem here is a major policy dissonance. We created this comprehensive plan in 2006. We created the UDO in 2006, and we applied them to the ground and into maps. And what we did in Forest Hills, though, is we put it in the urban tier, but we applied suburban zoning. And so the urban tier has one set of policies that follow it. But the suburban zoning, the RS10 and the RS20 that cover most of Forest Hills, have a whole different policy statement that go with them. And as a matter of fact, we're not supposed to have suburban zoning in the urban tier, and we're not supposed to have urban zoning in the urban tier, but we did it. And when we did it, we didn't explain why. Now, here and there, despite what the staff says, we were actually applying zoning based upon what was on the ground. And I get that, because what's on the ground matters. It's part of our built and urban environment, and there are people who own those properties and seek the stability and the reassurance that zoning provides them. Zoning is the police power of the state of North Carolina being applied to the ground for people in order to protect them. If it doesn't do that, then it's not constitutional. And so the people of Forest Hills are coming here and asking us to address this significant policy dissonance. Forest Hills was created in the 1920s through the 1940s as a suburban neighborhood, as our first planned automobile subdivision. And I know those are all bad words, but it's the first one, and it's closer than the others that we created later and that we're creating even, we're being asked to create one even tonight. And so I am moved very much by what Mr. Clayton says is concentric circles or a quilt. And to me, the quilt makes sense when we're looking at what's built on the ground. And we have to decide, is what's there something that is, as a part of the built environment, an asset to the community that we want to keep and protect? Or is it something that needs to be changed? So we go back to the big policy question is what does Durham want out of Forest Hills? Should Forest Hills, as it exists today, go away? Or is it an asset that we want to keep? Now, the city staff report says, oh, proximity to downtown. Well, at no point is the area in Forest Hills that's the subject of this change actually contiguous to the downtown tier. If we made this change, the urban tier would still intervene. It would be a big distance. But when I read the definitions of the various tiers, none of them are actually measured against proximity to downtown. The tiers can be anywhere. And we have made some tier decisions. And I realize the hardest thing for me in this application is that under the tier scheme in our comprehensive plan, which is our current policy, we don't have breakaway sections of tiers very often, but we do have them, especially in our compact neighborhood tiers. There's over near me, we have a compact neighborhood tier that is centered at LaSalle Street, but a big hunk of it is clear on the other side of the freeway to the north with no connection at all. Even if you took the freeway out, the two pieces wouldn't be contiguous because we took out a hunk in the middle. So to me, we have to make a decision, and I suppose as Planning Commission members, each of us has to make a decision. To me, I am persuaded by these neighbors. I believe Forest Hills is an asset to the city as it exists, and that the dissonance between the zoning and the future land use map ought to be resolved in favor of the zoning. If we wanted to add language to the comprehensive plan as it related to this kind of situation, I'd be interested in that, a text approach rather than a map approach. But right now we're confronted with a map approach. And one of the things, quite frankly, and you've heard me say this over and over again, that persuades me is increasingly over the years that I have been involved in land use planning, either professionally or as a member of this commission or a member of this community, I have watched the ability of ordinary people whose interest in planning is just their homes get pushed further and further away from the process. And this is one of those rare instances where a community has stood up, looked at the code, said, this is our right, and has come to us. I don't follow every community over a cliff, but what's being asked of us today is not unreasonable. I listened to Mr. Kane, my friend, say it was no, excuse me, I listened to Nate say it was a bit of a Hail Mary. Maybe it is. Maybe it is, but I think that this is a place where we can demonstrate our willingness to get away from the tier system, which isn't working very well, and we are asked to change from time to time. This is a place where I'd change it. I do not see this, though, creating a cascade or an avalanche of similar requests. In my opinion, we'd just be fixing this one map area. And when the city staff says, oh, it's going to hurt the city because it's going to compel us to extend services outside, I just think that's silly. Forest Hills is there. It has been one of the most stable areas in the city, and it isn't changing, and it isn't going to change dramatically. I realize that the neighbors were concerned when they had, after having kind of a Rip Van Winkle period when they didn't have to deal with zoning cases and what have you, they were jarred into becoming citizen planners. Bravo, we need citizen planners. We need the community to reach out and grab the steering wheel. And we need to make space for them, and we need to reward them when they do it, when their requests make sense and are reasonable. And this is one of those things. I noticed that in the staff report, we talk about how that Forest Hills currently isn't consistent with urban tier. The urban tier is supposed to be small lots on a grid pattern. Forest Hills ain't that. That's an argument for this tier change. That's an argument for this tier change. We don't talk about how the applicant's request is consistent with the definition of the suburban tier. As a matter of fact, we don't talk about the suburban tier at all in the staff report. But it is consistent with what our vision is of the suburban tier. So I think that there is room in our larger scheme to look at what's on the ground and decide reasonably, thoughtfully, for the benefit and the welfare of the people of the community who just want a stable, steady, and reliable policy expression with regard to their homes and their neighborhoods to make this correction. Like I said, I do not see a lot of these coming. As a matter of fact, I don't think we'll see another one. And we certainly are not going to see one before we go to the table as a community and come up with an entirely new comprehensive plan, which I hope will not result in another major policy dissonance for this neighborhood or any other. And so for these reasons, because the community has asked for it, and because it is their community, and they're the real people of Durham, not some abstraction, and because what they've asked for is reasonable and corrects a problem that has stood since 2006, I'm going to vote for this, and I urge my colleagues on the Planning Commission to vote for this so that we can send a signal that ordinary people still have a role in what we do and say when we do planning and zoning in Durham, North Carolina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any additional? Okay, I do have Commissioner Williams, and we'll go in that order. Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Johnson, and Commissioner Durkin, and then Al Turk. And I think we'll end it there.
Thank you, Chair Hyman. I want to echo the sentiments by Commissioner Miller in terms of Forest Hills. And you guys have been to the mat a lot with the changes that have come, and you guys have been quite versatile, but I definitely understand the need to want to say, okay, we want to protect our neighborhood as it is, its characteristics. I am no stranger to being from Durham, and I grew up riding through Forest Hills looking at Christmas lights. So I don't know how much that changes. I grew up riding down, University Drive and looking at the house that has a dollhouse that's just like it in the front yard in complete awe. And I do think that some characteristics that are Durham need to remain Durham. And being a lifer, there's been a lot of change. And Durham is growing by leaps and bounds, but what happens when that growth stops? What happens when, the downturn or whatever that is comes about and these characteristics are forever changed because of right now what the demand is? So I think that we need to preserve the neighborhoods that want to be preserved by the people that are in their neighborhood. And just because we have the opportunity to do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should, because we're trying to accommodate other people, because there's other ways to do that. We can put our heads together and we can figure it out. But uprooting a neighborhood that has been long-standing, that obviously does not want to be uprooted just because there's land available, doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So I am inclined to agree with Commissioner Miller, and I'm going to vote for this.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hyman. So let me start by thanking everyone for coming out yet again to speak in support or in opposition to this particular case. What I want to echo in just regards to participation is when we talk about where we want to see Durham going, what should Durham look like, the activity and the energy by this community is exactly what I would want to see from any community that has an issue regarding their community and their neighborhood. So whether I agree with the position for or against, I think that the fact that you are proactively participating in the civic engagement component of how do you make your community the way that you feel is ideal for you is exactly what I would want to see Durham, like a definition of like what Durham is. And so thank you all again for coming out. I came here very, a bit torn, and I guess I'll say that with the mentioning of the NPO process and the prospects not looking promising in regards to an outcome for or against what's being asked for, makes what we're considering tonight reasonable in the sense of you have an idea of what you want and may not want in your community, and there are tools, and some tools are basically being truncated in regards to the timeliness of what needs to happen. And so, the conversation around, suburban versus urban, I'm with Commissioner Miller in that we have to be cognizant of what's here before us. And I think the question that will guide my decision, and I think that we're all faced with, and ultimately will be one of the questions I think that city leadership will have to answer, is the question that you asked. It's like, do we see Forest Hill as something unique and worthy of preserving and protecting, or is it something that we're okay with seeing changing and we're okay with positioning it to change? And I'm not from Durham, but I'm from the South. And when I came to Durham, one of the first places I was told to go and just see was Forest Hill, And so I think that it is something unique to the identity of Durham, and that there should be efforts to keep that unique, make sure that it's an asset 20, 30, 40 years from now, not when a downturn comes up, but when Durham seasons into what it's gonna look like going forward. If this community is something that we want to be a part of the ongoing history of Durham as a organic city, then I think that making a decision in regards to how do we ensure that we don't erode that is something that must be proactively a part of our decision-making. And so with that, I am inclined to all considered support what is being asked, even though I think that the MPO would be a better way to try to get some of the outcomes that creates a win-win situation. I'm just not confident that that's going to be something that's actually viable for this community. So with that,
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
I'll just be brief, because if you vote no without saying anything, I don't think that is quite fair. But I will be voting against this, and I will not be voting to downzone or reduce the density of a neighborhood so close to downtown. I wish that the Pinecrest development hadn't been reduced by such an extreme measure, because it lost any ability to have a mix of income in it, even if none of it was going to be affordable. There's no range. It's all very unaffordable. So I'm voting in favor of density by voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alturk.
Thank you, Chair. So I made a lot of comments at the last time that this came up, so I'll try to be a little bit more brief this time. But I do remember two things. I'm looking at my notes, and two things that I said, which is I don't see the urgency in the Flum amendment. And now that we're in the context, or that you're coming here in the context of EHC just passing, I can see where there's a little bit more urgency than there was in August of 2018. So I recognize that. I also, one of the big concerns that I had was, to speak to Commissioner Durkin's point, density. I mentioned that I thought the decline or the decrease in density, proposed density, was too much. And I do want to point out to my fellow commissioners and to others that many of the proposed zoning designations now are a little bit higher than they were in August of 2018. So, if something is zoned RS10 or even RS20, the change is not considerable. It doesn't go to under 4 units an acre. It goes to 4 units or less, but not. I think initially it was something like 2 units or less, so it was quite drastic. So I recognize that, and that's, I think, a nice compromise that the neighborhood has come to. I also agree that I think part of the issue is that I'm not sure that the urban and suburban tier designations make sense anymore, and I think that part of this is obviously a bigger policy question, and I am a little disappointed in the way that EHC was adopted. Maybe this is just ego or something, that our recommendations were not taken into consideration by the City Council, and I think that the way it is that it was adopted was not the right way to go, and I think now we're going to have this pushback, right? And neighborhoods are going to, kind of fight back against what they see as a not very good policy. My concern, however, is that I think, and one of the things that I did not like about EHC is that it was concentrated, or it was focused on the urban tier, and it said nothing about the suburban tier. And my concern is that what we would possibly say here if we voted in favor of this is that we are okay with changing Forest Hills to the suburban tier, but I'm not sure that I agree with how the suburban tier is being developed currently. We have lots of applications that come before us, and there will be one tonight where it is a policy failure in the way that the suburban tier, the policies that we have in the suburban tier make it to where we encourage sprawl and we encourage low density. And that puts pressure on the urban tier, and that puts pressure on rising costs in the urban tier. That puts pressure on a lot of things in the city. I think that, you know, we should allow for more housing types in the suburban tier. So for that reason, I would be hesitant to say that we should change Forest Hills designation to the suburban tier, because I think some of the things in EHC I don't actually disagree with. And I think and that kind of brings me to another bigger point. We often talk about neighborhood character. I'm not really sure what it is about EHC that will change Forest Hills' character that much. Now, I know that might be, you know, that some people here will disagree with that. But as I mentioned when we were discussing EHC, I think most of the effects of EHC will be in other neighborhoods. I do not think it will be in Forest Hills. I think there will be some new duplexes probably in Forest Hills, but not considerably that many. So you know, when we talk about character, I think that I still don't know if, you know, EHC as it is implemented now, as imperfectly as I think it is, will radically change the character of Forest Hills, or even considerably. And maybe I'm wrong about that. To me, and commissioners have already mentioned this, I think the right way to do this is with an NPO or with a local historic district. And so you know, if we don't like the way EHC was done, I guess my response would be I also don't think that we should do a flum amendment to, you know, because that seems too, you know, we're just kind of, we've got this neighborhood and we've decided to change the tier. And I don't think we should do that. The thing that I like about an NPO process is that it allows residents to come up and decide and to talk about design concepts, things that actually preserve the character. That and so I think that's the process that we should try to encourage. Now I will ask the staff one more time, if I may. So do you have any idea when that process will come back, or will even be, or is there any chance of it, you know, going forward in the next, I don't know, 6 months, year?
6 months, no.
Okay, year?
We could do another budget request next year to hire someone to, excuse me, to do the NPO for us. But while we're doing the comprehensive plan, all our staff are working on that.
So I guess when the staff report does say that there are other tools, you mentioned local historic designation, and how different is that from an NPO process in terms of staff resources and?
The processes are very similar.
So does that mean that the city will not prioritize that either?
So it's, yeah, not the city's decision. The JCCPC does a work program.
Okay. So if 50% of residents in Forest Hills wanted to go to start the process of a local historic preservation, how long will that take? I mean, do you estimate? I mean, then it will have to go
Usually,
back?
any planning process takes 18 months.
Okay.
At the shortest.
All right, and so in the NPO process, basically, we should assume that because the planning staff is going to focus on comprehensive plan for the next 3 years, that it will not come back to you, or, you know, that it will not be a priority.
Unless we get additional resources.
Okay. I'll wait to see. Okay, is that it? I mean, I think, I don't know, I'm very torn about this. You know, I like the Old West NPO process because I thought it allowed residents to really think about what it means to preserve character. And I think it's a real shame that this neighborhood doesn't have that process or that opportunity. So I think Commissioner Johnson is right in the sense that this is pushing us to possibly vote in favor of this. And I don't know, I guess I'm still torn about that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. A couple things that come to my mind is, again, what Commissioner Alturk does bring up is there's we've got some of the cracks that are in the EHC there. I think that's really what the issue is that because of the way the HC was passed, some of the comments was to expand the HC into the suburban tier. I think there's also what Commissioner Miller talked about is the inconsistency in the zoning between the urban tier and the suburban tier. So I do think that there are some inconsistency and there's some cracks. And this is a way to try to get around that type of concern. And I think my concern is we're putting kind of a Band-Aid on this situation by changing the flum rather than to address what some of the issues really are. So my concern is more from a comment perspective is, do we want to do it right, or do we want to try to patch it for the time being to try to prevent any other type of development? So that's my concern.
Thank you. Commissioner Bryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Several things have gone through my mind that I find that I agree with. I don't think the tier designations have that much meaning anymore either. I think EHC, the way it was done, is flawed. And while they focused only on the urban tier, they didn't do anything for downtown or for compact neighborhoods. And I think ultimately it's going to have to expand to the suburban tier if it's going to be successful. And I also believe that even though there are alternatives like MPO and historic district and so forth, you've heard what staff has said. As long as the comprehensive plan is ongoing, there isn't going to be staff to work on these things. And based on the fact that they tried very hard to convince the powers that be to get a consultant hired to work on an MPO, they failed. And I can't see that they're going to be successful if they try again next year. So it may actually be something of a Band-Aid, but I'm inclined to support this simply because they're trying to protect their neighborhood. They've come to us for help, and I think we should help them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bryan. Any additional comments before I request a motion? Okay.
Madam Chairman, I move that in case A18/04, the Forest Hills comprehensive plan change, that the Planning Commission send this forward to the City Council with a favorable report.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner Bryan, that we send this item forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
No.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Bryan?
Yes.
Commissioner Durkin?
No.
Commissioner Alturk?
Yes.
Chair Hyman?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago?
No.
Commissioner Baker?
No.
Commissioner Lowe?
No.
And Commissioner MacGyver?
No.
Motion fails 6-6.
Pardon me? What did she say?
I'm sorry.
What was the vote again?
6-6.
Thank you. We're ready for the next item. Staff report for Olive Branch Road.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Jamie Sunyak with the Planning Department. I will be presenting case number Z180015, 100 Olive Branch Road. The applicant is Alnardo Escavera from Rivers Ravenel. The location is at 1001 Olive Branch Road. The property is currently located within the county. It's pending annexation. The site is approximately 216 acres. It's currently in the low-density residential future land use designation. The request is to change the zoning from rural residential to planned development residential with a density of 2.944. The proposal is up to 616 single-family attached and detached residential units with an associated annexation case. Just as a background for those who were not part of the previous application or who were on the Planning Commission or in the audience, on March 12, 2019, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to approve a rezoning case with the same number. That application included a total of 562 units. It was recommended by a vote of 9-2. The case also involved an annexation petition, which the City Council denied by a vote of 4-5 on June 3rd, 2019. Without the annexation approved, the City Council did not have the jurisdiction to act on the zoning case. The applicant amended the development plan, increased the number of units by 54, along with some additional proffers, which I'll talk about later, from the previous request. The planning director reviewed the amended application and determined that the increase in density is a significant modification which would require an additional public hearing before the Planning Commission, and that's the application that's in front of you now. This is the aerial map that shows the property located in red. It is located within the suburban development tier, Neuse River Basin, and the Falls Jordan Watershed Protection Overlay District B. The site contains 2 properties. The northern property includes intermittent streams and wetlands and has been identified as a natural heritage inventory site, but no managed species were found on the property. The southern property also includes intermittent streams, as well as perennial stream, wetlands, several buildings, utility easements, and a well. This is the existing and proposed zoning map. On the left, the property is in yellow, which is rural residential, and the applicant proposes to change the density and the zoning to planned residential development 2.944, which is compatible to the PDR to the west, which was approved for 540 single-family homes. Phase 1 is under construction currently. Phase 2 and 3 have been approved but not yet built, and as shown on the development plan, there are 3 internal connections provided between the approved development to the west and this site. I just wanted to give you a context. This was not included in your staff report. A context of some of the surrounding development that has either in place or is under review or approved that you don't necessarily see because you don't see site plans and subdivision applications, but it kind of highlights the neighboring properties, some of which there are single-family subdivisions across Doc Nichols Road, 62 single-family site, 62 single-family residential developments. Site plan is under review, 108 additional single-family. That's on the northwest side. In addition, as you travel down Olive Branch Road, there's another rezoning case, which is currently under review, which you have not seen yet. That includes 448 units. There's additional minor subdivisions, recombination plats, as well as the properties that are currently underdeveloped and built, the Fendel Farms site, as well as a number of properties off of Leesville, NC 98, and the surrounding areas. So that gives you a general context, as well as Del Webb, Brightwood, and Brightleaf residential developments nearby. So in some cases, when you look at aerials and you don't see that context, it does look like the site would be disconnected. But if all of the contiguous development activity is approved and built, this would be in context with that. This is the future land use map. The area is designated as low-density residential, which is consistent with the residential request and the rezoning request. This is the development plan. The development plan provides site access points, proposed collector streets, project boundary buffers, riparian buffers, crossings, the 10-foot no-build, tree coverage areas, and impervious coverage. In terms of the development plan and the text commitments, the development is limited to single-family detached and townhouse units. There's a maximum of 90 units that would need to be constructed. A maximum of 90 units must be is the max prior to a second point of access in the roadway network. Additional asphalt for bike lanes and dedicated improvements. There's a series of improvements that are shown on the cover sheet of the development plan that address the traffic and the TIA. The two additional text commitments that are new from the previous development plan include proffers relative to the public school system, as well as the affordable housing program. Those are included on the cover sheet. And in addition, the development plan has graphic commitments relative to, again, the access points, stream crossings, collector streets, tree coverage areas, the project boundary buffers, as well as design commitments to roof types, building materials, and architectural features. In terms of the comprehensive plan and its policies, it is not consistent with the current designation of the FLOM. I'm sorry, that is incorrect. There's a typo on this slide. It is consistent with the low-density residential designation on the future land use map, so that should not say industrial there. If approved, the application would allow for 616 single-family residential units, and as I mentioned before, this would support contiguous development. It's surrounded by the PDR at a similar density to the west, and the rural residential districts to the north and east. And I provided you with a slide in the aerial that shows the context of the surrounding development patterns that are going on right now. There is existing infrastructure such as roads, water, and sewer, sufficient to accommodate the potential impacts. With respect to policy 716A, the northern portion of the site and the east of Olive Branch Road is identified as a natural heritage site. However, no part falls within the wildlife habitat area or resource area, and no managed rare species were found on the site. The proposed development is consistent with policy 812H. While there will be an increase in traffic from the proposed zoning, the applicant has proffered text commitments relative to improving the traffic conditions in accordance with the TIA. The proposed development is consistent with 814D. The development plan commits to additional asphalt for future bike lanes, and there is sufficient capacity with the school system to accommodate the anticipated growth. So that is my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. We will open the public hearing. May I please have the list of individuals who have signed up to speak?
I'll give it.
Well, she's right there. Thank you. You may have to help me with the spelling of the last name. Let me start with Arnaldo. Okay, Arnaldo. Would you come forward and pronounce your last name?
Madam Chair, with your permission, if we could reorder the speakers just a little bit.
Okay, because he is the first that's listed.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, you may.
So if I can go first, my name is Randy Herman. I'm on the list to speak. I'm an attorney with the Banks Law Firm.
First of all, based on the number of names that I have here, each individual will have 2 minutes. So I'm
Thank you, Madam
starting
Chair.
with,
Randy Herman.
okay, I do see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Again, Randy Herman from the Banks Law Firm. I'm the attorney representing the applicant on this case. The other individuals that are going to speak in favor, Chris Simmering from Mungo Homes, which is the developer. He's going to speak about the company and its history in the city of Durham, developing other neighborhoods. Arnaldo Echeverria from Withers Ravenel is the lead engineer. He's going to come and talk about some of the technical changes that we have made to the plan since it was before you in March. And also Brittany Chase, the traffic engineer from Exalt Engineering, is going to come before you and speak about the results of the TIA and some of the road improvements that are going to be made as a result of that. The only thing I wanted to add in addition to staff's presentation is just to give you a little sense of the feedback that we have received from City Council after we appeared before them the first time. As staff said, our annexation request was denied. We had meetings with all members of City Council to discuss what specifically they wanted to see out of the site. And the number one result we got was that they wanted to see additional density. So we went back, we added an additional mix of units, smaller units, and overall about 45 additional units on the site. A number of additional townhomes with the intent of enhancing the affordability of the homes and also allowing more units to be on the site. Because of some of the technical issues, which Arnaldo will speak to, we now have, we believe, the maximum number of units that could physically be located on this property due to stream buffers and topography and other physical challenges with the site. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Simmering.
Okay, Chris, all right.
Hey, good evening. I'm Chris Simmering from Mungo Homes.
Okay, now we'll start.
Now start. All right, well, I'm Chris Simmering from Mungo Homes. And I came before you with this project before, and we were really happy with it. We thought it was a good project. And you guys voted for it, and we took it to City Council, and they made it, gave us some feedback, and it was all music to our ears. And we were really excited to be able to improve this project by really fine-tuning it to what is our best market, which is that first-time home buyer market. We've done really well with that here in Durham. We have several subdivisions that we do here, and plenty more that we're trying to plan. But this one in particular, this piece of property is a really stunner. It has a lot of streams, a lot of hills that make it kind of difficult to develop in a very dense fashion. But we were able to realign some of our product mix. We lost a lot of the bigger lots that were there, added a new lower price point townhome that we aren't able to build in a lot of places because a lot of neighborhoods aren't looking for that, despite the fact that there's a large demand for it. So we're really excited to be able to offer that, especially in this proximity to Briar Creek, where there isn't anything like that. And also there's going to be a real park feel here. We're working hard to preserve these streams and the real beauty of the property. We have 3 miles of walking trails that are around them. And we just feel like it's going to be a great place to live. And we're excited to put 616 families on this piece of property. So thank you.
Thank you. Brittany Chase, I have 2, Brittany Chase and Arnaldo. So Arnaldo, okay.
Good evening. My name is Arnaldo Echeverria with Withers Ravenel and the engineer of record representing Mungo Homes on this case. Am I given more than 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
My address is 5237 Copain Cove in Fuquay, Varina. So like Jamie mentioned earlier, the project saw an increase in the density, and that was a result, like Chris Simmering explained, of following up with the city council members. The density changed from 2.686 to 2.944, which resulted in about 54 additional units overall, and a change in the unit mix. So originally we have 419 single-family homes and 143 townhomes. So we swapped some of the single-family homes and added over 100 townhome units to the development, now for a total of 372 single-family and 244 townhomes, which is an increase from 25% of the total site to about 40% to work with bringing in more affordability to the neighborhood. That was not an easy task. This is not just a matter of changing numbers and coming here and talk about it. We actually had to do some extensive engineering work to come up with that conclusion that that could actually be afforded in the site due to the existing conditions. So I wanted to also point out some things that the development plan doesn't necessarily clarify, which this project has 13 tributaries that are buffered. We are doing everything possible to impact as minimum as possible with the 5 proposed crossings to increase connectivity. At the same time, we're incorporating about 3 miles of off-road trails that connect the neighborhood parks and open space with a dog park and amenity site. I wish I had more time, actually, but there's a lot that this project is doing that the development plan doesn't necessarily show, and is going to be very exciting for the community and the future residents.
Thank you. And Brittany Chase.
My name is Brittany Chase with Exalt Engineering in Raleigh. Exalt worked closely with the city and NCDOT to prepare a traffic impact analysis, otherwise known as a TIA, to study the existing and future 2023 conditions of the roadway network surrounding the proposed site. As you're aware, the purpose of the TIA is to analyze the potential traffic impacts of the proposed development and to identify any roadway improvements necessary to mitigate the impact of the project traffic. The analysis showed that there are traffic concerns present under existing conditions as well as future conditions even without the build-out of the proposed site. The developer has committed to constructing roadway improvements that not only mitigate site traffic, but will also address these traffic concerns that exist today. These improvements include widening Olive Branch Road to a 3-lane cross-section in between the project driveways, as well as constructing 4 turn lanes on surrounding study intersections. These intersections include Olive Branch Road at Doc Nichols Road, Olive Branch Road at Carpenter Pond Road, Leesville Road at Shady Grove Road, and Leesville Road at Doc Nichols Road. The developer has also committed to performing signal warrant analyses at 2 study intersections, Olive Branch Road at Carpenter Pond and Leesville Road at Doc Nichols. If signal warrants are met at these traffic signals will be installed. It is also important to add that there are additional roadway improvements committed by other developments in the study area. City transportation staff has indicated that if these improvements are not completed by others as planned, these improvements will be required of this development as well.
Thank you. I have 2 other individuals who have signed up to speak against: Christy Ferguson and Brian Calloway.
Hi, I'm Christy Ferguson, 1011 Homer Street, and I am requesting that you vote against this rezoning application. I am watching with mounting alarm as developers plan our city and our county. Here we are in the middle of a climate change crisis and population growth. We have spent the last year debating small incremental changes to the density within our already walkable in-town neighborhoods. Many have argued for transit-oriented development, neighborhoods with properly scaled blocks for walking, open space, shade trees, neighborhoods that are close to amenities and jobs and have right-of-way networks that anticipate future land use needs. And what are we doing? We're contemplating allowing a developer to rezone 200+ acres of forest to put in exactly the type of sprawl that has been railed against by proponents of expanding housing choices. All we seem to be doing in Durham is zoning. We need our neighborhoods to be planned and connected to one another. We need to plan, not just rezone. We need to make choices about what happens and where instead of letting the development community make those choices for us. And for that reason, I request that you vote against this rezoning request.
Thank you. And then Brian Calloway.
I could actually begin with a point of order and ask a question about the time. Does the opposition have 10 minutes total?
The opposition has 10 minutes total.
Okay, I do not plan on using 8 minutes, but I would.
It's okay,
It'll keep going? Okay,
Yes,
thank you. Okay,
please.
appreciate it, Commission. My name is Brian Calloway. I'm of 307 Gresham Avenue in Northgate Park. And I am asking that this evening you vote against this development. As has been stated, we're discussing 200 acres of really rural existence right now between here and Raleigh. And this, we've heard earlier, and staff has presented well. Staff is just asked to negotiate or navigate the development process without including value judgments. We turn to you for those value judgments first, and ultimately to the council. So this evening, I ask that you contribute the value judgments that this community has been discussing over the last many months, which is what we want the future of Durham to look like. We are gauging all of these points and kind of the development map around a 2005 comprehensive plan. We are on the cusp of having the opportunity to reevaluate and retool that comprehensive plan, and pushing development of this scale this soon to this close to that process. I would ask that you would vote no simply for the fact of giving the community a chance to reevaluate how we prefer the periphery of our community to be changed and developed. Further, though, I believe it would be one of the most striking of hypocrisies to move forward with this as proposed. We've heard much about the interest in density, which I very much have an interest in density, especially in our urban core. We've heard much about an interest in the diversity of housing, which, again, this is a 100% single-family rezoning request. 100%, 616 single-family units. We've heard that, we want the city to address racial equity issues, and we've known and have stated, and our entire city council has derided single-family zoning as a racist instrument. And we are asking, we have developers from out of town asking us to rezone rural property into a single-family rezoning. I would ask that you stand in that way tonight. We've heard the mayor and many others discuss. I would even say since 2005, we've had a collective consciousness increase on the climate effects of our lifestyle, especially of our development patterns. This is a development that I'm afraid that for decades we will have to see on the periphery and tell ourselves that, wow, we knew all about these negative externalities. We knew about the cost that these have both in local and the extension of services, and also the more global climate costs that development as in this pattern has. And so I would ask that this evening you preempt what we expect at the City Council, given their recent statements against single-family zoning, promoting the diversity of housing, and promoting density, none of which this development does. So I would ask that you would make a statement tonight so that we can move forward to the council and ask for better development in Durham. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close the public comment period, are there any other individuals who would like to speak? You need to come forward, and I will need you to state your name and address and then sign our sign-in sheet.
Apologies, this is my first Planning Commission meeting, so I didn't realize I needed to sign up. My name is Ricky White. I live at 1602 Delaware Avenue in Durham, and I'm the new director of the Ellerby Creek Watershed Association. And so I was looking through the agenda this week and saw this particular rezoning request come up. Want to make a couple of points about it. One is that, with all due respect to the staff summary report, I believe that it did not fully state the impact of this development on the natural heritage of Durham County. I'll refer to page 2 of the site characteristics summary, which says that it was a natural heritage inventory area. And it seems like a small distinction, but it's actually a natural heritage site, which means that of all of Durham County, it was considered one of the more significant natural areas. And so even though it doesn't have a federally or state listed species on it, it's still an extremely important part of our natural heritage and natural history in Durham County that we should consider. Now, the good news is that it's not the whole site. It's just that top triangle that's in that natural heritage area. So if you look at Appendix 12 of the summary report that the staff compiled, you'll see the map, which shows the overlap between the site and the site of the development and the natural heritage site. And what that shows is that there's an opportunity there to consider asking the folks who are developing the property to do a few more things to try to address that natural heritage issue. And what I would suggest is that we consider having that triangle be part of a conservation easement or some kind of conservation land so that it can be joined with the rest of the heritage area and preserved in perpetuity. I think the second point I would like to make real quick is the city of Durham has made a commitment to the Upper Neuse Clean Water Initiative. If you're not familiar with that, that's essentially the initiative that is working to clean up Falls Lake for the purposes of making sure that the drinking water in Raleigh is safe to drink. The area that is identified in this plan is a really high priority for the Upper Neuse Clean Water Initiative, which means as a land trust, it would be a high priority for us to acquire to make sure that we could preserve the water quality of Raleigh and be a really good neighbor. And again, it's something that we've committed to as a group. So when I saw the map that was projected earlier that showed all the other developments under site review, I may be coming back a few times because I feel like a lot of those sites are overlapping with that floodplain, with that bottomland area, and with some of the areas that we would consider extremely sensitive and extremely important for protection. I'm not necessarily saying that we don't go forward with the full development. I'm just saying I think there's some more that we need to do to tweak it. So I'd suggest that you guys consider taking it back to the staff and working to tweak this a little bit more. Thanks.
Thank you. I do not have any additional individuals who have signed up to speak during this public hearing. At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and give commissioners an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. I'm going to start to my right. Are there any commissioners who would like to speak? Okay, Commissioner Brine, and okay, we'll start with Commissioner Brine and Commissioner Busby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To me, this rezoning application really seeks to create what I would consider to be another example of urban sprawl. However, tonight I want to use the phrase scattered residential development well away from the city center. The reason I want to phrase it that way is because I found that planning staff's opinion on scattered development was interesting. Scattered development increases environmental impacts felt by everyone by increasing impervious surface area for roads and driveways and greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants from automobiles, deepening concerns about flooding, water quality, and air quality. In addition, it requires more public staff and vehicles to service, costing local governments and its taxpayers more money. If that sounds vaguely familiar, it was from the staff report for the preceding case. And I think much of that statement does apply to this particular application. For example, vehicular trips per day are increased by over 3,000. This area is heavily wooded, so I think loss of tree cover is another concern. Loss of tree cover is an air quality issue. Now, I have no desire to really put him on the spot, but when this was before us the first time in March, Commissioner Baker wrote a long comment about it in which he presented arguments as to why this particular application or the original application was not consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I went back and found what he wrote, reread it, and I agree with him. I don't think this is anywhere near consistent with our comprehensive plan. And the present application is really, to me, slightly worse than the first because the density is slightly higher. So all the problems like pollution from automobiles, loss of tree cover and stuff are all slightly higher. So I will not be supporting this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Busby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a couple questions. The first question is for the applicant, and it could be any of you who spoke. You mentioned the 3 miles of trails and then mentioned that they would go off-site. I was just curious to just hear a little bit more about that, especially I don't see it on the proposed conditions map. So if you can come to the microphone and just address the plan.
So I'm glad you asked the question. It was intended to say off-road profile trails. They're basically going to be located within the streams and connect the different pocket parks within the neighborhood and dog park and amenities throughout the site. And we are making a great effort to maintain the tree canopy. I wish we could present the illustrative plan of the development because it's very green. We increase the density while maintaining the same impervious that we had in the original plan, or actually maybe reducing it. We're increasing the open space, particularly on the northern section that was brought up before as a heritage site. We understand the conditions that we have a big wetland located on that site or section of the site as well. So like I said, we're making every effort possible to maintain the beautiful natural features that are located on the site. And in terms of the imperviousness, we are limited already by being in the watershed overlay to only 24% impervious through the entire site.
And excuse me if it's on here, maybe I'm just getting older in this very small print, I'm missing it, but are those things in here on the proposed conditions map, the trails or the tree preserve areas? I see the buffer zones along the streams, but are those actually, I hear you saying they sound like committed elements. I don't see them on here as a committed element. Am I missing that?
So they are not committed. They were actually presented initially, but since those locations are still to be approved by the city and the state, because most of the trails will be located within the buffers, then it was recommended to not commit to it at this stage in case anything changed in terms of location.
Right, okay. So at this moment, you're making a verbal commitment for the 3 miles of trails and the tree protections, but that can change. You know, my voting on it tonight is predicated on what is on this map or what is a proffer. So at the moment, you're saying your advice from outside sources is to not make those type of proffers.
That was the advice from staff during the review process, but we have time only to put together one site plan. We know what that site plan looks like, and there are definitely features of the site that we wouldn't have a problem committing to, since we're ready actually to file it.
Right, okay, thank you. I will say it makes it very hard for me to vote for this without those commitments in writing, but I'll continue to listen. So I appreciate those answers. A question for staff, just a second question. So we did hear one of the citizens who testified talk about single-family housing only. It says townhouses, and I feel like somewhere I saw a number, but I couldn't find it.
Yes.
Is there a committed number to the number of single-family homes and the number of townhouses per units?
Right, if you look in the site data table on sheet 2, there is, it's bubbled, clouded. My copy, I'm sorry. That's the total number of units. The TIA limits the number of units, and it was broken down in the TIA as the breakdown. So my understanding is the traffic-related improvements are all relative to that number of single-family and townhouse units. I don't believe that there is a specific breakdown on the development plan that matches up with that, just the cap at 616.
So the cap is 616, that can be a mix of units. The number that, so you're saying I wasn't making that up when I saw a number
Right, it's in the
somewhere.
TIA memos and on attached.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an attachment 10 describes the unit type, and in the first paragraph,
Yes.
highlighted in red, the proposed residential development, and that gives the breakdown there.
Great, so that's good for my self-esteem at least, so I did see those numbers. But these aren't committed elements, correct?
Correct.
Those numbers could change.
That's correct.
But there is a commitment that there will be a mix of housing types. Is that correct?
Correct.
So townhouses are committed along with single-family housing?
The way that, let me just go back before I overspeak. The commitment on the cover sheet, text commitment number 6, the development shall, so I misspoke, the development shall be limited to single-family detached residential townhouse and all permitted accessory units. So they could have one or the other. However, the improvements associated with the TIA and what was approved and is on the cover sheet of the development plan is based on that breakdown of the number of units.
Right, so in practice, if that mix changed, we would have to redo the TIA and redo that entire analysis, so it's not gonna change.
Okay. And staff agrees
Probably
with
would
that
have to come
assessment?
back before you again.
Because that'd be a good thing to have in the front of the report, if it's.
I'm sorry, we can't allow you to come in to speak with, no.
Oh, he just did, so I.
No.
Okay,
The applicant.
all right, I'm sorry.
These are the applicant.
Okay, well,
What I would say relative to this, and I'm looking over at transportation, if they have any conflicts with what I'm saying, is obviously if there is any modification in the number, and that would be reviewed at the time of site plan in association with the approved TIA, then the TIA would have to be modified essentially if there were changes in the TIA and that dictated modifications to certain provisions on the development plan, they may have to come back.
So if these numbers changed, if we went from saying that it would be 372 single-family homes and 244 townhomes, if that changed, that would all be required to come back to us as Planning Commission? Or would that just be the cost to run a new TIA at the site plan process?
Right. Early and Thomas, Transportation. So the way the text commitment is written, they can do up to 616 units. Now, they have an approved amount of peak hour trips that they cannot exceed, so they can certainly do all single-family homes, but it would be much less than what they're proposing. So they wouldn't be able to exceed the number of peak hour trips.
Right, thank you. So this is not a committed number of units, if I understand it correctly. Essentially, could it be all single-family homes then? I mean, they're saying it could be single-family homes and townhouses, but they could do just single-family homes and still, as long as they fell under the TIA traffic numbers. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Unless it was proffered as a committed element or it was taken back and put back into this proposal.
Correct. If they committed to a proffer of a mix of single-family and townhomes.
We are willing to commit to a proffer of no less than 30% townhomes.
I'm sorry, and first of all, I think from a process perspective, I think you do need to be recognized by the chair to speak. And I was talking to the chair, so I missed what you said. But if
My question was, is there an additional question that you need to ask of this applicant before?
Right.
Or were you done?
No, I'm not finished, but I will ask a question. If are you willing to make a proffer? But I do think it's worth noting that if you do make a proffer, then I think the staff have to decide if the proffer is a kind of a low-level proffer that allows this case to continue forward this evening. But we do have a history where staff might say this is going to require a 30-day or 60-day continuance.
Yeah. I missed sorry, we were debating the language relative to limited to single-family, comma, townhouses, comma, accessory uses. The wording is not, it could be open to interpretation. It probably, if it's intended to be a mix, it probably should be a mix of single-family, comma, townhouses, but so on and so forth. So I missed what was said.
No, thank you. I think at this point, I was just going to ask the applicant if they, I have a concern about the lack of clarity here about the number of units that we're talking about for mixed use. And so I was wondering if the applicant was willing to add some specificity that we can actually put on here and feel confident this is what we're actually going to get, as opposed to the current process, which I don't believe I'm comfortable to vote for at the moment, because it sounds like there's a lot of things that could change. So that's the question for the applicant, if they are comfortable making a proffer that would specifically note some range of units of single-family homes, townhouses, or accessory dwelling units.
Madam Chair, may I respond?
Well, the question that I had of staff was, can this be done at this particular time?
Too much time in the huddle.
Staff is willing to entertain a proffer. However, until we hear it, we can't tell you whether we need more time to analyze the impacts on the TIA or any of the other associated items on this case. So we're not opposed, but
We'll give you an opportunity to go ahead and proffer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proffer would be first to have a mix of detached single-family and townhome units, and also specifically to have not less than 30% townhomes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And while, I'll give the staff a moment to huddle, I did have one additional question, and it was for Mr. White, if you don't mind coming back up. And this is my final question.
Thank you.
Planning
Staff
Commission.
is comfortable with those two proffers.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So, Mr. White, you had talked about the, and I read this the first time and I just didn't quite capture what you raised tonight, so I really appreciate that you've come and spoken about this. You talked about the natural heritage site. And what I would love to see, I mean, you talk about the top triangle of the development. I don't know if we can get a picture of the map.
Right, if it's possible to get a picture, I can show you what I'm talking about. And yeah, is that possible? And the other thing you can do is look at, again, appendix, I think it's attachment 12 in the report, which is going to show where the overlap is.
In particular, I just want to see how big that area is, given.
So that's one possibility.
So it's everything to the north of Olive Branch Road, almost.
Okay.
So this doesn't show the heritage site, but if you can imagine, the green area is that FLUM designation recreation open space. The heritage site itself the boundaries are differently defined. And so it actually is inclusive of that northern, do you guys see what I mean by northern triangle? Yeah. So it's the area that actually north of Olive Branch Road, right there. So it's that little crosshatched area. And that's the area that's most important in terms of potentially affecting water quality and also affecting the larger corridor in terms of the animals and plants that are along that corridor. So although there's nothing state listed or federally listed on that particular site, it's part of a larger site called Lick Creek Bottomlands, which is kind of a mega site that goes all the way to Falls Lake. And there are things like four-toed salamanders, and there's a historic Carolina darter, which is a fish habitat in that area. And so anything that you do to impact this area is going to impact that larger site.
Great, thank you. And then just my final question, just to make sure I understood it correctly, your recommendation, I heard you say two things. One was recommending taking a little more time on this proposal. That was number one. And then number two was considering this being preserved as a conservation land or put into a conservation easement of some sort. Did I accurately capture your recommendations?
That's correct. And I think the main point is there's dual concerns around stormwater runoff and water quality and around conservation of natural resources. And both of those, I don't feel, are properly addressed currently in the current configuration, especially in that northern section.
Great. Right. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. That's all.
Thank you. Other commissioners who would like to speak? Commissioner Miller.
So thank you, Madam Chairman. And I thank my colleagues on the panel for clearing up a whole lot of the questions that I had especially about commitments relating to the amenities that were discussed. And my takeaway from the questions and the answers were that most of what was talked about is planned to go into the stream buffer area, which is not something I understood when we discussed this case 6 months ago, and it's a little disturbing to me. And I also heard some discussion about the nature of units and affordability. But I have to note that with the exception of the proffer for the contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund, there really isn't anything in the commitments which bends towards affordability. In other words, the courts have been hard on the enforceability of even commitments for, overt enforceability, absent using a affordable housing density bonus, which isn't being employed here. But you can put things in your committed elements which, like I said, bend the project towards affordability. Like, it is perfectly appropriate to have a committed element that that limits the size of units. And while it doesn't necessarily have to be true that smaller is more affordable, it is generally true that smaller is affordable. And I'm very interested in making sure that as we grow, we create market entry, homeownership opportunities. And that would be important to me here. I supported this project when it came to us before, primarily based upon an analysis of how it fit against the future land use map and the policies in the comprehensive plan. And I listened at that time to Mr. Baker's argument, and I was unpersuaded. But then I listened to Mr. Baker's argument. Actually, it was more of a memorandum that he shared with the EHC committee that we formed about his vision for the suburban tier and the role that it will play in absorbing the new housing that we have to create for Durham's growth. And I found that actually more persuasive. And so we are engaged now in a process to redo our comprehensive plan, and it is where we will have an opportunity to see what Mr. Baker was talking about, actually translated into real policies, and then I hope changes to our zoning code, whether we continue to call it a UDO, I don't know. Fads constantly change. But I would like to know and understand and become more conversant with this new vision for development in Durham's suburban tier. In other words, we've called this, some speakers have called this sprawl. Some folks who are on that side of the dais and some people on this side of the dais. That's a word that I have trouble with, and insofar as our current comprehensive plan says that in certain bounds, and especially in the suburban tier where this is located, we're supposed to have low-density residential development. Is that sprawl? If it's what the plan calls for, I don't like name calling, unless I'm the one that's doing it. No, so I have trouble with that idea, but I'm open to the idea of how we can develop in the suburban tier in a way that isn't sprawl, that uses density thoughtfully. I'm not somebody who thinks that all density everywhere is good. I don't think it's good, and in this instance, I don't like it. And so I agree with Mr. Bryan. Adding units here doesn't thrill me because I like the idea that we preserve some sort of rural Durham County. And I don't see in that we can do it in an orderly fashion. So I want to understand how we can shape future development in the suburban tier in a way that isn't sprawl, but still provides the houses and the mix of housing that we have to absorb the growth. So, and we're engaged in that process right now. And so I don't see an urgency on taking a tract this big out of the equation when we are just starting. And then finally, something else happened since that last time this came forward. I was invited by some folks who live out Highway 98 to come look at a piece of property which is soon to be the subject of another suburban residential rezoning out here. And they very cleverly asked me to come and join them at a meeting at somebody's house at about 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I forget what it was because it didn't make any difference. I was an hour late. And that's not because I didn't start on time. I noticed that the staff report did an analysis of the impact of this project, the intersection of Olive Branch Road and Highway 98, and said that it's a level F now, and it will continue to be a level F after this project is developed, except for that it would be 196 seconds instead of 154 seconds. Well, I can tell you on a couple of these lights out here, and I lost track, I sat there and watched. I could see ahead where 12 changes of one light and 16 changes of another light. I do not know where all those people, who they were, where they were going, but it was just an ordinary evening. And that worries me. I am concerned about whether or not our current highway infrastructure can absorb all of the development that is being asked for and is already approved. I was not aware of that when we talked about this before, and maybe we need to slow down and plan a little bit better in this part of the county. So I am not saying I could not support this project if it were a little bit more specific. And I appreciate the developer. He's been bounced back and forth, and I hate that. And I have just become one of the bouncers because I will vote no tonight when I voted yes before. But I believe a better project could be put on this property with a better vision and with more specific text commitments and map commitments, and I would be happier. And I realize that this is going to, whether I like it or not, it's going to go forward to the city council, and I realize that, you know, I watched that city council meeting on the TV, and I listened to the mayor and some other council people talk with the developer about this project and how it related to affordability in Durham. That's important. And I realize that the developers made a concession in connection with affordability, but that's not what motivates me tonight. I am in the process of substantially rethinking my view of how we take these big sites and develop them is to be part of an integrated, more effective functioning Durham. So I've talked a lot and said a little. Thank you for putting up with me.
Thank you. Are there other commissioners who would like to speak? Okay, Commissioner Al Turk. Okay, and then Commissioner Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Miller, I think you actually said a lot, I can't remember exactly how you said it, but you said a lot and you made me think about a lot, because I also, when I hear the word sprawl or scattered development, I don't know what, in some ways, I don't know what that means, and I don't know what the solution to that is, right? So I can imagine us saying, well, we should just not vote for it and not put anything there because we want to preserve this piece of land. But I can also see an argument to say, well, just make it really dense and have the infrastructure around it to where it doesn't represent, you know, scattered development or sprawl. So I guess I do want to hear more, and I'd love to hear more from Commissioner Baker or Commissioner Bryan, who also mentions, you know, scattered development. What exactly should we be doing with these kinds of sites? I think, again, part of the problem is, you know, it seems like we have a policy problem and not necessarily a reason, you know, it's not necessarily that, this is not a reason, in some ways this is not a rezoning case that we have in front of us. We're making a decision about what we want here and not necessarily whether it is congruent with the UDO. And so I don't know, it just, I'm still struggling with what do we do with sites like this, especially when we talk about population growth, especially when we talk about we need housing. So, you know, do we let this sit and not provide more housing, or do we just say, no, we need to have better plans, we need to have better, you know, better development. And I think that will be a struggle. That's an uphill struggle. One of the things that I think came up in the city council meeting is that it seems like, you know, if we're going to say no to this, then, you know, do we have to say no to every other, you know, large-scale development in the suburban tier that looks like this, even when it, you know, more or less developers are doing what, you know, the policy says they can do. So I'm struggling with this, and I would love to hear from others about what should we do about sites like this. What do we mean about? What do you mean when you say connectivity, for example, or housing types? Why do we want mixed housing types? So I'll direct that to Commissioner Baker if he'll indulge me.
Commissioner Baker.
So, so when we look at sites like this, we oftentimes forget kind of the scale of a site like this. This is almost the size of Trinity Park, the Trinity Park neighborhood. It's only a couple dozen acres less. And when we think about Trinity Park, it's obviously a neighborhood in high demand. People want to live there. It's walkable. You can place anybody in Trinity Park and they'll know that it's a walkable, livable neighborhood, a place where people can afford to live and can afford to get around, have access to transit, have access to jobs and a variety of other things. You might not be able to say exactly why that is, though. And the reason that it is because of the connectivity, because when you walk down the block, you're walking down a block that's 300 feet long, 400 feet long. The types of developments that we're building today have block lengths of 5,000 feet long or 6,000 feet long. And that's just how we're building. So it's difficult to get from point A to point B and get a direct route there. It's almost impossible to get there as a pedestrian, even when everything is fully built out. We just don't have the standards, and the developers are not coming forward with commitments for that. There are a lot of other features that make developments less sprawly or more walkable and more livable. And those are important to incorporate into new types of residential development. And the reason is that we often think of maybe the affordability of housing. And that's sort of isolated. Affordability of housing is, if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing, then your housing cost burdened. But more and more planners are looking at, are you spending more than 45% of your income on housing and transportation? And so you can actually look at a map and look at who is housing cost burden in any given city in the United States, in North Carolina. You'll see people who are housing cost burden, they're close to the city center. But when you flip that and you look at who's spending more than 45% of their income on housing and transportation, the map is opposite. You're seeing people who live further away from the amenities that make life a livable place are spending more than 45% of their income on housing plus transportation. So we need a shift in the way that we're doing development, the way that we're building, whether we're planning this in the city. It requires new development incorporating a whole host of different types of things. So that might include a compact, dense variety of housing types integrated. When you walk down a street in one of these neighborhoods that's more walkable, more livable, you have that variety of housing types. You have multiplexes next to single-family houses, next to townhouses. They're all incorporated, all on the same block. You have all of it. You have connected streets with short, walkable blocks. And so that would require both internal and external connectivity. So you can code that. You can code all of these things. You can code the external and internal connectivity. You can code maximum block length. You can also code sidewalks and street trees. We just voted on sidewalks. We need to fix our street trees. You can incorporate a variety of accessible and appropriate uses and for employment and for services, the things that you need to get to on a daily basis. How are people in sprawl or scattered residential developments, how are they going to get to the things that they need to on a daily basis? They can only get there one way. There's only one way. There's no option. If you live in Trinity Park, you can still drive to places. If you live in some of these other neighborhoods, you can still drive to places. And of course, there are new residential developments around the country that are incorporating these features. And oftentimes when we look at them, we see, okay, they do tend to be a little bit more expensive, but there's nothing inherent in the way that those developments are built that makes them more expensive. It's that we are under-providing these types of living opportunities. We are only providing, at this point, we are only providing single-family, homogeneous developments. And so that's really important to consider when we're looking at how we want to change and develop. We also need to make sure that we are protecting and making accessible green spaces and small-scale agriculture. We need to make sure that we're anticipating connections to transit, anticipating those connections. So can we expect that there will be transit accessibility for development like this in the next 2 years? Absolutely not. But will there be connections there in the next 20 years? Well, if we design it right, if we incorporate those connectivity elements and make it a walkable, mixed-use environment, a place where people can live, yeah, in 20 years, it could be just as accessible to transit as anywhere else in Durham. We also want to make sure that homes are within a quarter of a mile. That's what we call the pedestrian shed, a quarter of a mile of parks and trails and other types of uses. We want to make sure that there's an accessible and connected open space network. We want to make sure that there's multimodal infrastructure wherever possible. There should be a variety of different options for people to be able to get around, and that should be incorporated not just into the land uses that we have, but into the actual infrastructure that's being built. One important feature of a lot of neighborhoods that make them particularly walkable and accessible and livable is when they incorporate alleys. So a lot of the more livable types of neighborhoods, whether they're old or whether they're new, and of course when we walk down in the urban tier neighborhoods in Durham, we see that a lot of those neighborhoods incorporate alleys. Alleys are very important because they allow much easier placement of accessory dwelling units. It means you get rid of the driveway in the front, so you don't have any danger to pedestrians that are walking down the street, and you place a lot of other utilities and services in the back of the house. Makes the neighborhood much more walkable. You can move the house closer to the front. It's actually a lot more efficient. A lot of developers like to do it because they don't have to make the curb cuts in the driveways. And if you have the right width of the street, then that's an important feature. And then, as always, we want to find ways of incorporating affordable housing. Obviously, we're limited in what we can require in terms of inclusionary zoning, but making it easier to build those accessory dwelling units is an important part of a more livable, walkable neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Bryan.
I have a question for transportation, please. Which generates more traffic, a detached single-family home or a townhome?
Early and Thomas, transportation, single-family detached, generate more traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Morgan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things that come to my mind, and this is kind of probably illustrates sort of our challenges as a board from a policy versus zoning perspective. This is a zoning request that was given to us. We passed it. We had some policy concerns, and then certainly the City Council passed it back to us to consider some of the policy issues themselves, but still they did it on policy basis. I don't regret the vote that we took before, but I do also think that sometimes we have to leave that to our elected officials, to our advising. Since we're an advisory body itself, we should be pretty much looking at the merits of the applicant and what they want, they offer. And I do think that since there are a number of developments that are done around here, it really kind of raises the issue, what do we really want to do in this area? And we have a number of things that have been going on, and I don't know whether we should put it all on just one request, but also look at some of the neighboring things that are going on. And I think that's something that gets passed up to the elected officials to mull over and decide for that. I don't know whether that's our job as commissioners other than provide the opinions. And I guess when I'm making my vote, I'm not doing it on opinion, I'm doing it on what's the merits of the application and then going forward. So my thinking is this is part of how it works. And I think that we can provide the opinions, but I think also we should stay in the context of the application, see what makes sense, vote on it, advise, and then see what the next steps would come from there.
Thank you. Commissioner Durkin.
I just had a follow-up question for Arlene at Transportation. So the proffer made was not less than 30% townhomes, But currently at 244 townhomes, that's 39.6% at townhomes. So it's unclear whether the proffer really does anything, if they'd have to go back and change the TIA if it dropped below 39.6 townhomes.
No, that would not necessarily require them to change the TIA. They would still be limited to the number of approved trips. And that mix can change, but they couldn't exceed that trip balance and the required improvements that are associated.
But if they increased the single family by almost 10%, if they flip the balance that much, would that not trigger?
No, again,
Necessarily?
it depends on the trip balance. So
Okay.
they could increase the number of single family and decrease the number of townhomes or vice versa and stay within their trip budget.
Okay, but it's unclear whether 30% would trip that balance or not.
Well, I would have to run the
Yeah,
numbers
right, okay.
to see.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So, they wouldn't be allowed to exceed that.
Got it, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams.
So, as I was listening to the residents and some of the concerns and thinking about past comments that have been made as far as the commissioners are concerned when it comes to what we need to do as far as density is concerned and the environment and being conscious in terms of green building and design, I was just actually reflecting on, as we create density and we talk about runoff, don't we also increase the carbon footprint? And you kind of can't have one without the other. So I just traveled down Olive Branch Road, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and it could stand some upgrading, especially if it rains really, really hard. There's part of it that make it very difficult to travel because the water ponds, and I'm looking at the amount of deer that pass through there on a regular basis. I don't know that that's going to change with the development, but I'm kind of up in the air in terms of some concerns that were brought to my attention with the presentation from both the development side as well as the resident side in terms of what we're going to do to the environment, but more so in terms of how it's going to go about being developed. I'm not as much concerned about proffers as I am in terms of runoff and knowing that when you have a lot of hilly areas, the most probable thing with those tend to be single-family properties with below-grade foundation that is established typically with split-level homes that are the most economical for that type of land. I haven't taken a look at the topo of it, but having looked at the area as I drive through, I'm pretty sure you're going to unearth a lot of difficult things to navigate once you get in there and start clearing land. So I think that you're going to face a lot more difficulties than you may be prepared for going into it because you are uncertain what's over there. I'm pretty sure you can't drive trucks in that area to look at it, given the amount of down trees that are already there from site to site, and that goes all the way through, I believe, Doc Nichols in terms of the area. So if you're up to the challenge, I definitely think that you should be afforded the opportunity to see what you can have come out of there. But I do think that your site plan, or at least what you're proposing, is a bit ambitious given the terrain there. But from what I hear thus far, it does sound like it's going to be okay. And as far as walkability is concerned, I don't know, it's still quite a ways to the Walmart. So good luck.
Commissioner Miller.
So, Madam Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'd like to ask Commissioner Baker a question. So this,
I'm sorry, one additional, Commissioner Johnson. Comment.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I just had a couple questions. One is you spoke of affordability. Do you have a anticipated price point for the single families and the townhouse products?
Are you asking me?
The applicant, anyone from the applicant's team?
Yeah, we believe that the lower price point townhome that we've brought should be available around $220,000. That's a one-car, two-story product. is about 1,700 square feet.
And for the single-family detached?
The single-family detached, we have several different types that we're gonna put in there. We've got a Charleston-style row home. Those ones we believe will be just under 300, around 275, 280. Those products are rear entry, alley-fed products. Then we have some more traditional detached single families that we're building over in Rustica Oaks. Those ones will go right around 280 as well. They have the 2-story porches. And then we have some larger product that ranges, you can actually get it anywhere from 2,200 on up to 4,000 square feet. Those ones will start around 325, 350. And really, depending on how fancy you get with it, the sky would be the limit on what you could do with that in the design center if you pick fancy stuff. But the introductory level on our top of the line stuff should be around 320.
And finally, do you have a sense of what's the distance from this project site to the nearest shopping market, supermarket? Kroger, Harris Teeter?
I don't know. I know Briar Creek is very close and just north of there. Arnaldo probably does know that.
There's a food line up.
Exactly how far it is.
Okay.
Up to 98.
Yeah, I'm familiar. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Only question.
Still auto accessible.
It is. You have some additional questions?
I did. I don't want to jump ahead of Commissioner Miller.
Well, I think he was gonna make the motion.
No, I wasn't. I was going to ask a question.
Oh, well, let's just keep going all night.
If that's
All
what
right,
it takes.
Commissioner.
So I wanted to ask Commissioner Baker, right now, somebody owned this piece of property under the way it's zoned today. The staff advises me you could, as a practical matter, put in somewhere around 250 units. And they would be single-family homes, and they would be on pretty big lots, unless they did a conservation subdivision, which would give them a clustering option. Strangely, the staff advises that a cluster subdivision is not available in rural residential. And I take it that that kind of development is not something you would support for this site. So what I'm trying to do is Commissioner Member Morgan said that we have to look at this in the context of this application, and I do think that's important. However, I want to know more about your vision for how we develop in the suburban tier. But a lot of what you were talking about is simply not available right now. But these developers have this piece of property and they're ready to go. The thing that they've got that's available to them that, in my opinion, if handled correctly, could sway me from a no at the moment back to a yes, is the development plan. So from the ideas that you were articulating to us, are there things from that list of ideas that could be translated into development plan commitments for this site and this project that would make you more favorable to voting for its rezoning? I'd like to know, what can this developer do within our current code and our current plans and policies and the development plan device, which is a wonderful tool if we use it right. What can they do that can make this a better project that I could vote for?
I need to recognize Commissioner Baker if he wants to respond.
Good question. With regard to this individual site, it's a little bit difficult. I mean, there are a number of things that I would like to see as standards, a number of things I would like to have coded, but I would like to see green building incorporated into the development. I would like to see a minimum connectivity index. I would like to see a maximum average block length, understanding that there are a lot of limitations on the site. If we have a maximum average block length, I think that would do a lot to provide some flexibility while also achieving some of the goals of walkability. I would like to see additional uses incorporated into the site. But that's a more challenging thing, and I wouldn't expect that. I also wouldn't vote against something if it didn't necessarily incorporate other uses. So I think the most important thing is connectivity at this point, because you can change land uses, you can take a building, you can build a building, knock it down, but right-of-way and streets, those are very enduring. Look no further than southern Manhattan or downtown Boston or Pompeii, and we see that the streets remain in many cases. Obviously, we have cases where they don't, but those are more difficult to change. If you have a part of your city that does not have very many connections and it has a lot of cul-de-sacs, it's very difficult to go in afterward and fix that without buying up people's homes and tearing them down, which we just wouldn't do. So I think that that's the most important thing, is ensuring that there's a minimum level of connectivity, recognizing also the scale of this development, the connectivity that is actually necessary to be able to achieve a more walkable community. And another reason that's important is that, sure, we understand that sometimes we do have to build a neighborhood or build on a site, recognizing that it might not be walkable today, but at least teeing it up so that it can be walkable at some point in the future. Think of a large-scale commercial development where you at least incorporate short blocks within a parking lot. And so you can expect future development will incorporate infill onto that parking lot. That's something that a lot of communities are doing now. So if you tee up this development for future retrofits, which is not ideal, but we also recognize that we're not starting with an ideal situation, but that would be enough to sway me at some point.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That's all I have. I note for the record that in my service on the Planning Commission, that's the first time anybody held Pompeii up as an example with regard to urban planning.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Bryan?
Busby. It's been a long night.
Madam Chair, if I may, we've done the research and found the answer to Commissioner Johnson's question.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson then will respond to you because he asked a question, so he's going to have an answer to your question. That's the only way that I can get it back to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the closest grocery store is on Highway 98. It's a Food Lion. It's 1.5 miles away. The site is also 3.7 miles from Briar Creek.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Commissioner Busby.
Great, thank you. I did have just a couple final questions for the applicant, and I appreciate your patience because I know you've been here before, you've been to council, you're back here again. My particular interest is just making sure we have clarity around what's actually in the plan. So I do appreciate the proffer on the townhomes as well. This question about the natural heritage site, the issue that was raised tonight by the Ellerbee Creek Watershed Association, that just didn't come up at our last hearing here at the Planning Commission. I mean, it was noted, but the distinction that was raised, on the current proposed conditions map, it is listed, that little triangle, as proposed residential single-family townhomes. Do you have a sense of how many units you're talking about on that particular part of the property?
Well, that's the part of the property where the city is running our sewer connection right through there. So that's where we have to connect our sewer into anyway, eventually. That side of the road, I believe, has roughly 70 townhomes on it. Most of it is more down towards the road, so that the northern part where the wetlands are and the most of the natural stuff is undisturbed. And I'd be happy, I'd love everybody to see our development plan. It's done, it's ready to go. It's just not a part of this process.
Right.
If I can add to that quickly, I just talked to Arnaldo, and he gave me the figures of that northern triangle that's north of Olive Branch Road. about 50% of that is going to remain undisturbed, and that's the part that's the northern half of that that's closest to the stream.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And is that beyond what is noted on here as the wetland buffer? I mean, because when I see what the buffer zone, just to my eye, looks like a lot less than 50%.
Yes, it's significantly bigger than that buffer zone.
May I ask why it's not then listed on here? You seem to be taking some of your best arguments for me to vote yes off of the table tonight by not having the trails listed, not having 50% here. And it sounds like you're getting advice to give yourselves more wiggle room at site plan, which I understand, but I've learned the hard way sitting on this planning commission for a number of years where I voted on something where I was told, oh, we'll do it, and then that doesn't always turn out to be what the case is.
Sure. In large part, it's an artifact of the review process that we go through with staff. We would love to be able to show, for instance, the walking paths on the development plan, but as soon as we draw them on there, then we're committed to not just having walking paths, but the specific paths. So we can't even move it 1 foot over if it turns out that there's an issue. And so we are limited in how much we can commit to without then having no flexibility at all.
Right, and I understand that the tight spot you're in. Is it possible to have a proffer that is in writing that would say things like, we commit to having 3 miles of trails on this site, or we commit to 50% of the northern land north of Olive Creek, Olive Branch Road will be preserved as open space or open lands? I mean, those are the kind of things that would give me and I think the community comfort, because it's in writing, but it still gives you the flexibility and the leeway, which I understand you need that to be able to move forward. But I hope you see our challenge of, without any of this in writing, it can change.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I say all that also, my final question is this. You've been here many times, and I hate to even ask. My inclination is to vote for a 60-day continuation to allow us to get the wording right and to bring it back and to have time where you could work with the staff and get the wording in a way that doesn't box you in, but gives us, and more importantly, this community, a level of clarity. You could even sit down with Mr. White potentially and hear his thoughts and concerns. The fact that you're offering 50% of this area to keep as open space, I think is really important and significant. I'm sure it'd be hard to pull off here on the fly. So before I would make a motion like that, though, I just want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on a 2-cycle delay? And I know you've been through a lot of delays, but what's your feedback?
My problem really is that we've been going on 2 years. I'm about to run out of contract time to own it. So in all reality, this is my last shot. If we don't make it now, we drop back, develop it as a county subdivision, 2 units per acre. And with those septic, that's what we would have to do.
That's a 2-cycle delay, you believe that
my contract won't survive that long. I have just until shortly after the first of the year contractually. And so if I don't get at least site plan approval before then, we will have to develop it in a different way.
Okay.
And we have drawn up a development plan for that.
Can I ask the staff, is this even possible to get this to site plan by that timeline? Through us, through council, and to site plan?
It's possible if the applicant already has a site plan submitted under review, which applicants do on occasion. They do sign a waiver understanding that if this process was not approved, then their site plan can't be stamped and approved. Staff just wanted to jump in and say that there's a lot of talk and proffers of things going around, and we would definitely need a continuance. We're kind of tapped out on the ideas that are swirling, just to make sure that we're in compliance with the UDO and some other things, because there's a lot to look at on this site. So if there are going to be any additional proffers other than the one that's been proffered this evening, we would like a continuance. And I would like to point out that the applicant does have an annexation petition tied to this application, and we only have annexations that are they go to the council quarterly, and they're made effective quarterly. And we're in the last quarter of the year, which means if they don't continue to move forward, they're going to miss the annexation effective date for December
I'm not saying you have to, I'm just explaining how this works and why he probably has a time crunch. The next quarter would be March of 2020. So that's, I'm giving you some real information on how our dates work, just so you have that.
No, that's fair.
No pressure on what you do. I just wanted you to know how the process works.
Yeah, and I'll use an official planning term when I say that stinks. So I'm not going to make a motion to continue this. I hear your situation. Others might. I'm not sure that helps anybody to have you drop back to a different plan. I'm not sure I can vote for it tonight, given the lack of the details in writing. I appreciate that you've made them verbally, and I hope you stick with them. So I appreciate your candor. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move that we send case Z18-00015 concerning the property at 1001 Olive Branch Road forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner Williams, that we send item number Z18-00015, Olive Branch Road, forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Brine?
No.
Commissioner Durkin?
No.
Commissioner Alton?
No.
Chair Hyman?
Yes.
Vice Chair Busby?
No.
Commissioner Miller?
No.
Commissioner Santiago?
No.
Commissioner Baker?
No.
Commissioner Lowe?
No.
And Commissioner McIver?
No.
Motion fails 3-9. Motion fails 3-9.
Thank you. We will move to the next item. Public hearing for Carpenter Fletcher Road. Staff report, please.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Could we get a repeat of the vote, because there were 13 people voting, and the number she gave added up to 12, unless I heard incorrectly.
Okay.
My apologies, it's 4-9.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It is 4-9.
4-9.
Good evening. I'm Emily Struthers with the Planning Department. I will now be presenting case Z19-00017, 1612 Carpenter Fletcher Road. The applicant is Dan Jewell with Coulter Jewell Thames, PA. This 0.959 acre site is located at 1612 and 1562 Carpenter Fletcher Road. The site is located within the city limits. The applicant proposes to change the zoning from office institutional, OI, to commercial general with a text-only development plan, CGD. The property is designated commercial on the future land use map, which is consistent with the zoning request. No graphic plan is provided with this text-only development plan, and properties are limited to use commitments. This rezoning request includes a text commitment that the uses will be limited to retail sales and services, and further limited to health club or studio. The parcel, 0.959 acres, this site is located in red on this map here, the aerial, off of Carpenter Fletcher Road near NC 55. This site is located in the suburban development tier. The site includes a 3,200 square foot building previously used as a daycare and a gravel parking lot. The western parcel is undeveloped and vegetated with a mix of hardwoods and pines. The site is adjacent to a railroad. A mix of commercial uses surrounds the site, and single-family and duplex residential uses, as well as industrial uses, are located within the site's vicinity. Again, the applicant proposes to change the office institutional zoning to commercial general with a text-only development plan, limiting those permitted uses to health club or studio. As the future land use map here shows, the property is located within the commercial designated area of the FLUM. As this is a text-only development plan, I'm going to go through the dimensional standards for the commercial general zoning district. A minimum lot area of 20,000 square feet, a minimum lot width of 100 feet, a minimum street, side, and rear yard of 25 feet, although those may be varied where adjacent to non-residential or railroad right-of-way. Building coverage is limited to 60%, and a maximum building height is 50 feet. The proposed CGD zoning designation complies with the current commercial designation on the future land use map and applicable policies. The proposal is consistent with comprehensive plan policies, including policy 212C, 222F, 231A, and 232A. Further detail is provided in the staff report. Staff determines that this request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and other policies and ordinances. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. I have one individual who has signed up to speak, Dan Jewell.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Dan Jewell. I'm here at the request of my client, Steve Echeverria. No relation to the guy in the last case, also named Echeverria. Steve owns a fitness studio called I had the name of it right here, Arikion Hot Yoga. And so he's been looking for a site. He's currently renting in the shopping center down at 54 on Farrington Road. But he's been looking for a location for himself so he can expand over time and modify the interior of his studio, do what he needs to do. And he found this location. And because the word yoga is in the name, we at first went to the planning department, tried to convince them that since a yoga studio is listed as a permitted use in the O&I district, that we be allowed to do that. But I think what the staff did is they looked at the same video I did that showed what these guys do, and it's sort of some turbocharged yoga and fitness training. They do this circuit training where you go to various stations, workstations, and get good fitness training. So because of that, we are requesting this zoning. We normally don't come forward with just a text-only request. It is a fairly new tool that the planning department has given us, but we feel that because this is it's a small site, it's an existing facility that used to be a daycare but has been abandoned for several years. There's a building there, there's parking there, and you saw from Emily's presentation, we have a self-storage facility across the street with chain link fence and some concertina wire on top, railroad tracks on one side, what we think is a dentist's office on the back side with the largest parking lot I've ever seen for a dentist's office and commercial buildings on the corner. We think this, we hope, is an appropriate venue to request this text-only plan. And because the staff has determined that this is a health club studio, we are committing to the one thing that we can commit to in this text-only plan, and that is it will be a health club studio. It will not be a retail complex. It will not be anything else that might generate more traffic or more people or that sort of thing. We have done a yield study, even though the site it's about an acre, and we think with the required parking, the required tree coverage area, which this site currently does not have, the required landscape buffers that this site currently does not have, the required stormwater management, that we can maybe get about 7,500 square feet of building area on this site. Martin's actually done a yield diagram if anybody's interested in using it. So it's not a huge facility, but it's going to be a great location for Steve because of a lot of his clientele are working in RTP during the day and in the various office complexes around here. So for that reason and for the reason that we're requesting a very specific use in this facility, we're hoping you will agree that this is a good location for this and can find to recommend approval to the City Council. So thank you. Tried to keep it short.
Thank you. I do not have other people who have signed up to speak. So at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for comments from our commissioners, starting with my right, Commissioner Williams.
Yes, I'm quite familiar with the area. I have concerns. This is a single turn in and a single turn out facility because it used to be a daycare. And Cornwallis, well, Carpenter Fletcher at that point is a 2-lane highway, which is heavily traveled with traffic coming off of both off of Highway 55 and South Austin Avenue. So with creating a fitness center, I know if it's anything like most fitness centers, given the hours of operation, whatever they may be, you're gonna increase peak travel times if it's before 8 a.m. when most people go to work, and if it's after 5 p.m. when most people are coming home. I have concerns about how you're going to address the traffic getting in and out of there. And there is still an active train that goes through that area that holds up traffic on that hill. And at any given moment, traffic turning off of 55 going, I think, what is that, north on Carpenter Fletcher Road, that traffic backs all the way up 55 close to Highway 40, and then trying to make that left turn can be quite hazardous if you're not a skilled driver. So I'm just wondering, I'm pretty sure there wasn't a traffic impact analysis done for this because it's a zoning request, but I'm concerned about the amount of traffic generated, and there's also a sports bar that's across the street from this particular property that's quite active in the afternoons as well with pedestrians and motorcyclists and different things. And it's quite hazardous, and it's not too far from a school district, as Lowe's Grove Middle School is just down the road. So I'm definitely concerned about the amount of traffic that will be generated in this very congested area, and it is still just a 2-lane road. So how do you plan to address that, if at all?
Well, two things. If Earlene is still here with the City Transportation Department, they did an assessment, a traffic assessment. Also, there are firm plans now in place to widen Carpenter Fletcher Road. And in fact, a requirement of our site plan will be to dedicate additional right-of-way so that that can happen.
Okay, that's helpful. Oh, well, I didn't have any questions for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Other commissioners would like to speak? Okay. Anybody on this side? Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Love.
Thank you. Your day and time of operation, when would that be? The days of the week and the time?
I'm going to introduce Mr. Echeverria. He can tell you that.
Yes, sir. So we hold early morning classes. So we have a class at 6 o'clock from 6 to 6:45. We have a noon class, and then we have typically 2 to 3 evening classes. The last one ends at 7:45. And then on weekends, we have 3 classes Saturday mornings, and then we have classes Sunday, 2 classes in the morning, and then 2 classes in the afternoon. The morning on Sundays are about 8 to about 10, and then 4:30 to 6:30 on Sundays.
Okay. So 7 days a week you're open, but no later than 8 o'clock? Is that what
Yeah, our last class ends at 7:45 on Monday through Thursday. Friday, 6:30 is the last class.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller?
So I have a question about the commitment itself. Is Health Club Studio a specifically listed use in the table of uses?
So those uses, it's kind of bifurcated uses within the section retail sales and services. This had gone to determination, was previously identified under indoor recreation. After additional analysis, we realized that that use felt too broad from a standpoint of if this doesn't move forward, what could go in that place of more intense, more gymnasium type, higher use, higher intensity use, sorry. And so it went back for determination and was revised to this, which falls under retail sales and services. So the parking rate is a little bit different and is reflected in the parking table there. So it's a hard use to classify with the use categories that we're working with the ordinance, which is where we've landed on this.
So in other words, what I'm concerned about is kind of a bullseye approach, is that it's limited to retail sales and services, and then within that, limited to this
yes,
one particular thing. And I'm afraid, when I read it, I didn't, initially, I read it, I didn't read it that way. And so, but it's kind of like a concentric circle. The larger circle, it's limited to the smaller circle inside the larger circle.
Yes.
Is it necessary to express the larger circle? If we just said it was to a health club, studio, would that be enough?
This, having that larger circle will help when it gets to site plan for someone to know what that use is without having to run through all of the many uses and figure out where it falls, kind of almost doing another use determination within the use categories and the parking rates. This clarifies where they're going for that information.
Yeah, I would feel better if it said that it was limited to a health club studio within the retail sales and services category in the code section 5, whatever it was.
That language would work just as well.
Yeah, I would prefer it that way rather than to have it kind of start with the big one and then go to the little one. I would start with the little one and say as found in or something like that. But if you're satisfied, you know what I don't see this being a big problem. I just want to make sure I understood it. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners would like to speak? If not, I would like to entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that in case Z19-00017, concerning the property located at 1612 Carpenter Fletcher Road, that the Planning Commission send this forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Miller, second by Commissioner Al Turk, that we send item Z19-00017, Carpenter Fletcher Road, forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. All in favor of this motion, let it be known with a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Williams?
No.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Brine?
Yes.
Commissioner Durkin?
Yes.
Commissioner Alturk?
Yes.
Vice Chair Busby?
Yes.
Chair Hyman?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes?
Commissioner Santiago?
Yes.
Commissioner Baker?
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
And Commissioner McIver?
Yes.
Motion passes 12-1.
Thank you. Thank you. Under old business, there's one thing I need to double check because we've been moving pretty fast today. Did we do a motion to grant an excused absence to Commissioner Kitchen?
So move, we did not.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second that we, motion by Commissioner Miller and second by Commissioner Busby, that we grant an excused absence to Commissioner Kitchen. All in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand.
Got it.
All opposed? Thank you. And under new business, we have approval of the 2020 meeting schedule and a
Would
question.
you like to have the 2020
Yes, please.
calendar?
I only have the 19th.
We have
I don't know. I wasn't here when the packets went out, so I don't even know how it all happened. But anyway, here you go. So I'm taking, I think you have plenty, there should be plenty here. Passing that down. And it stayed true to our normal second Tuesday of every month. We didn't have to move anything due to a holiday.
Okay.
We can certainly make adjustments later in the year if we need to. That's not a problem.
You have October, that's the 2019
Yeah,
schedule.
you need to just throw that away
Throw it away, all
or
right.
keep it in scratch paper.
Sorry.
So sorry
Not paying
about that.
attention.
Thank you.
This is so much better.
Is that better? Correct. Hopefully it's the right year.
And you need a motion?
I do.
Madam Chairman, I move that the Planning Commission approve the proposed 2020 meeting schedule.
So move.
Did Commissioner Bryan have a question?
Yes.
There's a question.
I'm not worried about November, but I'm just worried, I'm just wondering, do we interfere at all with early voting in October in the primary?
I'll have to check that probably closer to, maybe after the first of the year, I can get with the Board of Elections and look at their schedule. I'm not sure, but we can make adjustments if we.
Okay.
We can certainly make adjustments. We just did that for HPC this year, for their schedule for next year, not to interfere with voting day, so.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Miller made the motion. Did I hear a second?
Commissioner Lowe seconded.
Second by Commissioner Lowe, that we, what were we doing? Approve the 2020 schedule for meeting schedule. All in favor of this motion, let it be known by raising your right hand. All opposed? And then we have one other, we have a question.
Mr. Bryan, were you opposed or you had a question?
I had a question.
Oh, okay, okay.
No, the question I had regarding the EHC.
Right.
City Council has requested to be updated every 6 months, and I think the Board of County Commissioners probably wants the same update on the same schedule. I'm wanted to ask staff, subject to the approval of commissioners, whether or not we, the Planning Commission, would also like to be updated on how it's going, since we put so much work into it.
Right.
Sure, we can, I'll make sure that gets back to the appropriate person and make sure you're on the same schedule for updates.
Thank you. That was the question, and thank you so much, Mr. Bryan, for asking. Yes, Commissioner Durkin.
Scheduling related question. Was the training that was proposed for the end of October?
I have not confirmed that with everyone. I got several, there were at least 3 people that had conflicts. So I've gone back to the drawing board to see if I can find a time. What I do need is the 3 of you, 2 or 3 of you that said you couldn't be here, to shoot me some times and days that you can be here. That would help me significantly, rather than me doing the guesswork. I know you had a conflict, Ms. Durkin, and I know Commissioner Baker had a conflict. So if y'all have some dates, anytime in November, later, just anytime in November, that we can just start with, maybe, that would be great.
Okay.
That would be really helpful.
Sure.
If there's a time of day that's better, if there's an actual day that's better, whatever, just shoot it to me, and then I can throw it out to the rest of the commissioners to say, yes or no, we can do that. So.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Miller?
Can you give us a forecast of the program?
So for the retreat, we're planning on focusing primarily on the new comp plan, and where we are with that and how things are moving forward, and trying to make sure that you're up to date with everything that's going on and you get your own special time, basically, with staff regarding that. We may have a couple of like maybe just a minor housekeeping. We can go over rules of procedure and any questions you have about that. Mostly focusing on the new comp plan.
At some point, I would like to have some sort of quick review, or at least the things we need to know about the new encodification of North Carolina's zoning laws. The new, it's moved out of, it's been moved into its own chapter, and
Right.
there are some significant changes.
That would be a great session for the School of Government personnel to come over and do, and just focus on that and not so much what a planning commissions do, because y'all kind of know what planning commissions do. But if I gave them that specific.
We still don't do it right, though.
Well, it's okay. But I think that's a great topic, and I think because that's so specific, and they already have a presentation that they are doing, they have a road show that they're doing, we can have them come over and do that. So we could do maybe the training first and retreat to talk about the comp plan, and then maybe work in a couple months later, or maybe early spring, or late winter, the code updates, if that works for everyone. Because we do have the ability to get them over here. They don't mind coming. They're very close by, and we try to do that every other year or so.
That would be great.
And Madam Chair, I had one additional follow-up question on the retreat. If it's still possible, I know we were talking about seeing if some or one of the consultants who is working on the comp plan process would be able to join us for the Planning Commission. So I might suggest, if this is what works best for me, it's fine if you don't do it, but with 14 of us, I might create a doodle poll where you tell us, here are the dates that work for you and/or the
Couldn't
consultants?
find any dates that would work for them in the near
Zero.
future. I mean, they are booked slant. I mean, it was either we were gonna talk about the comp plan soon, or we're gonna wait on their availability. They're only here certain times and very limited times.
Okay.
They have a pretty full plate. They didn't have anything available for like the next, I mean, it was like 60 days out, and I just was like, we need to have, I don't want you hearing things on the street that you're not hearing from us.
Right.
And I feel like you need that time too with us, where you can ask questions that you've thought about from things you've heard or other meetings. I mean, some of you probably have been to the outreach meetings already, and I feel like that you need to have your own time with us.
No, I
We'll
don't.
try to have the
I don't
consultant
disagree.
here, but I would rather not plan around the consultant because they're available at all the other meetings that they're already on the schedule for. And if you're interested in hearing what they have to say, you can go to those meetings.
So they'll be here for the
we-
week-long meetings in November?
I don't know if they're here for all of those, but I can find out when they're gonna be here and try to share with you. So if you're interested, you can go.
That'd be helpful.
I would really not like to plan our retreat around them because they're very busy. So the last thing I had was I don't have a typed up version of what you'll see next month, but November's gonna be kind of busy. We have 2 text amendments on the calendar that I'm aware of, and 3 zonings, no flum changes, and so 5 cases.
Wow.
If you want more information about that, you can email me, or I'll try to put something together later in the week, my little chart, and send it to you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Any additional questions or comments? Motion to adjourn. Rock.